Welcome to our channel. Hollywood Movie Review. Prisoners 2013 Movie Review. Prisoners is a 2013 American crime thriller film directed by Denis Villeneuve and written by Aaron Guzikowski. The film has an ensemble cast including Hugh Jackman, Jake Gyllenhaal, Viola Davis, Maria Bello, Terrence Howard, Melissa Leo, and Paul Dano. The film follows the abduction of two young girls in Pennsylvania and the subsequent search for the perpetrator by the police. After police arrest a young suspect and release him, the father of one of the daughters takes matters into his own hands. Prisoners premiered at the Telluride Film Festival on August 30, 2013, and was released to theaters on September 20, 2013. The film was a financial and critical success, grossing $122 million worldwide against a production budget of $46 million. It was chosen by the National Board of Review as one of the top 10 films of 2013, and at the 86th Academy Awards, Roger Deakins was nominated for Best Cinematography in addition to receiving a nomination from the American Society of Cinematographers. In the fictional city of Conyers, Pennsylvania, the Dover and Birch families celebrate Thanksgiving together. After dinner, girls Anna Dover and Joy Birch go missing after playing on a parked RV. Detective Loki responds to a police call about an RV matching the description and arrests the man inside, Alex Jones. During interrogation, Loki realizes Alex's diminished IQ prevents him from planning a kidnapping and his RV contains no forensic evidence. Loki runs down leads on local sex offenders and finds a corpse in the house of priest Patrick Dunn. Dunn admits to killing him after the man confessed to murdering 16 children for his war on God. The police release Alex to his aunt, Holly. Convinced of Alex's guilt, Keller Dover, the father of Anna, assaults him outside the police station, where Alex whispers to him, "They didn't cry till I left them." After Loki finds no proof of this, Keller kidnaps Alex and takes him to an empty building Keller owns. With the reluctant help of Joy's father, Franklin Birch, Keller begins to torture Alex for information about their daughters. Franklin, on the verge of releasing Alex, is convinced not to by his wife Nancy, but the pair decide not to stop Keller or alert the police. At a vigil for the girls, Loki approaches a suspicious man who flees. Loki releases a sketch of him to the community. The suspect sneaks into the Birch and Dover houses. Grace, Keller's wife, hears him and calls Loki. He tails Keller to the empty building, where Keller claims he goes to drink, but Loki does not find Alex. Loki arrests the suspect, Bob Taylor, at his house. The walls are covered in maze drawings and Loki opens crates filled with snakes and bloody children's clothes. Loki shows Keller and the Birch parents photos of the bloody clothes, and they identify several as Joy's and Anna's. As Taylor draws detailed mazes, Loki assaults him, demanding the location of the girls. Taylor grabs an officer's gun and kills himself. Keller continues torturing Alex, who cryptically talks about a maze. Keller visits Alex's aunt Holly, learning that Alex's stuttering stems from a childhood accident involving snakes her husband kept. Holly and her husband lost their faith after their son died of cancer, and adopted Alex as a way to cope. Loki matches the maze pattern in Taylor's drawings to a necklace depicting a maze worn by the corpse in Dunn's house. At Taylor's house, Loki is informed that most of the bloody clothes are store-bought and soaked with pig blood. Below a window outside the Dover house, Loki finds Taylor's footprints and a sock matching Anna's. The drugged Anna and Joy attempt to escape, but only Joy succeeds and is hospitalized. Joy remembers little, but when questioned by Keller, tells him, "You were there." He immediately rushes out. Loki gives chase and arrives at Keller's building, finding Alex. Keller goes to Holly's to find Anna and Holly pulls a gun. She explains that before the disappearance of her husband, implied to be the corpse in Dunn's basement, they abducted children as part of their war on God to avenge their son's death, and to create demons out of the traumatized parents. Alex was their first abduction, and Taylor was their second. Holly imprisons the wounded Keller in a hidden pit in her yard, where he finds his daughter's whistle. Loki enters Holly's house and finds a photo of her late husband wearing the maze necklace. Realizing that Holly is the kidnapper, he finds her giving Anna an injection. In a shootout, Loki kills Holly but is grazed in the head. He rushes Anna to the hospital while fighting unconsciousness. The next morning, a recuperating Anna and Joy visit Loki in his hospital room to thank him. Later, Loki wanders the crime scene at Holly's house, when he faintly hears a whistle blowing. Aaron Guzikowski wrote the script for the 2009 annual Blacklist, and based on a short story he wrote, involving a father whose kid was struck by a hit-and-run driver and then puts this guy in a well in his backyard. That short story was partially inspired by Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart. After Guzikowski wrote the spec script, many actors and directors entered and exited the project, including actors Christian Bale and Leonardo DiCaprio and directors Antoine Fuqua and Bryan Singer. Once Denis Villeneuve was brought onto the project, Timothy Chalamet unsuccessfully auditioned for a role. They eventually went on to work together with Chalamet playing Paul Atreides in Villeneuve's Dune trilogy, 2021-2026. Ultimately, Guzikowski would credit producer Mark Wahlberg for getting the project on its feet, stating, "He was totally pivotal in getting the film made." That endorsement helped it get around. Principal photography began in Georgia in February 2013. Principal photography for Prisoners began in Georgia in February 2013 and concluded in May 2013. The production, initially planned for Connecticut, was moved to Georgia for budgetary reasons. Filming took place in and around Atlanta, Conyers, Monroe, Porterdale, Lithonia, Stone Mountain, and Tucker. Prisoners premiered at the 2013 Telluride Film Festival and was released theatrically in Canada and the United States on September 20, 2013. It was originally rated NC-17 by the MPAA for substantial disturbing violent content and explicit images. After being edited, it was re-rated R for disturbing violent content including torture and language throughout. Prisoners opened in North America on September 20, 2013, in 3,260 theaters and grossed $20,817,053 in its opening weekend, averaging $6,386 per theater and ranking number 1 at the box office. After 77 days in theaters, the film ended up earning $61,002,302 domestically and $61,124,385 internationally, earning a worldwide gross of $122,126,687, above its production budget of $46 million. Prisoners was released by Warner Home Video on DVD and Blu-ray on December 17, 2013, in the United States and United Kingdom on February 3, 2014. On review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 81% based on 249 reviews. The website's critical consensus states, "Prisoners has an emotional complexity and a sense of dread that makes for absorbing and disturbing viewing." On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 70 out of 100, based on 53 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Christopher Orr of The Atlantic wrote, "Ethical exploration or exploitation. In the end, I come down reservedly on the former side. The work done here by Jackman, Gyllenhaal, and especially Villeneuve is simply too powerful to ignore." Ed Gibbs of the Sun Herald wrote, "Not since Erskine Kings, in 1999, has Hugh Jackman appeared so emotionally exposed on screen. It is an exceptional, Oscar-worthy performance." Peter Traverse of Rolling Stone wrote that Gyllenhaal was exceptional and that Villeneuve takes his unflashy time-building character and revealing troubled psyches in the most unlikely of places. The film was a second runner-up for the Blackberry People's Choice Award at the 2013 Toronto International Film Festival, behind Philomena and 12 Years a Slave. Gyllenhaal received the Best Supporting Actor of the Year award at the 2013 Hollywood Film Festival for his truly compelling, subtly layered performance as Detective Loki. In 2025, it was one of the films voted for the Reader's Choice edition of the New York Times list of the 100 best movies of the 21st century, finishing at number 121. Not all reviews were positive, however. Writing in the New Republic, David Thompson declared that the film was weary after 10 minutes and furthermore hideous, cruel, degrading, depressing, relentless, prolonged, humorless, claustrophobic, and a mockery of any surviving tradition in which films are entertaining. A mixed review came from Sheila O'Malley of RoachRebert.com, who gave the film 2.5 stars out of a possible 4. She wrote that Jackman's performance grew monotonous and that the film sometimes verged on pretentiousness, but was redeemed by a few excellent suspense sequences and Gyllenhaal's performance, whose subtlety is welcome considering all the teeth-gnashing going on in other performances. A gravely told drama for adults revolving around the abductions of 2 children, Prisoners centers on the families and investigating detective related to the crime through measured, confident direction by Quebecois director Denis Villeneuve. Impelled by staggeringly good performances from its ensemble cast, the film rises above its genre picture roots to become not only an effective mystery and intense thriller, but also an intricate consideration of vengeance, faith, justice, and loss. Inside a 2.5-hour runtime, Villeneuve and his prestige-level players develop and deepen Aaron Guzikowski's screenplay, its complex characters and situations held captive by an ever-present sense of dread. And while talk of the film's Oscar-worthiness may perhaps be overstated, the film belongs on the same list as similar award-worthy dramas as Clint Eastwood's Mystic River and The Changeling or David Fincher's Seven and Zodiac. As their families engage in post-Thanksgiving meal conversion and sleepy television viewing, 2 young girls from neighboring suburban Pennsylvania families disappear. The Dovers, headed by paterfamilias Keller, Hugh Jackman, and dependent mother Grace, Maria Bello, search for the girls frantically alongside their friends, the Birches, Father Franklin, Terrence Howard, and Mother Nancy, Viola Davis. The missing girls, Anna, Aaron Gerasimovic, and Joy, Kyla Drew Simmons, have vanished on a walk, and their older siblings, Ralph, Dylan Minette, and Eliza, Zoe Board, remember them playing near a creepy RV earlier in the day. On this case, dead. Loki, Jake Gyllenhaal, quickly tracks down the suspect, whom he's soon forced to release as no physical evidence is found in his RV. A child in the body of a man, the eerie suspect Alex, Paul Dano, is mentally impaired and can't, or won't, answer Loki's questions. Convinced Alex is guilty, Keller resolves to kidnap the now free believed kidnapper and violently interrogate him to determine the girl's location. Challenging in its treatment of vigilantism, the film's characters never become simple creatures driven to extremes of cathartic violence. Keller, a God-fearing, all-American hunter, carpenter, and survivalist, whose motto "Be prepared" is expounded by his basement stocked with emergency provisions, would seem to be purely fanatical, except his piety forces him to question his resolve more than once. Franklin goes along with Keller's plan at first, until his conscience begins to weigh on him, but Nancy would rather let Keller do what he must, just in case his suspicions are correct. Grace cannot cope at all and loses herself in prescription narcotics to numb the pain. Even Loki, who has never left a case unsolved, is more than your usual determined cop. His tattoos and heavy blinking show signs of a detective haunted by stress and the feeling that something is wrong with this case. Each of the performances on display here is just as multifaceted as their characters, with particular emphasis on Jackman and Gyllenhaal, who deliver the film's most impressive turns. Gyllenhaal mines similar territory in Zodiac, though the characters are very much different. Melissa Leo also appears as Alex's aunt, a quiet loner who's convinced her nephew is innocent. The film's vigilante subplot soon gives way to a tragic narrative, and Guzikowski's script veers in unexpected directions, later proving to be an elaborate, tightly knit canvas where no detail is meaningless. If a fault must be found in Prisoners, It's that Villeneuve allows the keen viewer to notice certain details and realize their connections to the mystery before some of the on-screen characters do. This happens more than once in the film, most notably in the last scene, and such a quality may weaken the film's overall suspense for some. However, the film is less a whodunit than a densely packed drama about how people cope, or refuse to cope, with a tragic situation. Villeneuve's formal treatment is fitting as a result, enhanced by Roger Deakins' gorgeous cinematography of earthy, autumnal colors, overcast skies, rain, and snow. The visual solemnity is in perfect balance with the film's bleak atmosphere and somberness. Editors Joel Cox and Gary Roche, Eastwood's longtime collaborators, never cut too fast, and in fact, hold onto a number of Deakins shots until the audience is forced to look further into the scene. Being Villeneuve's first Hollywood picture, Prisoners shows all the attention to character and mood as one of his independent foreign language projects, yet with the scale and sheer star power you might expect from a larger Warner Brothers production. But this kind of dark material is rarely seen in Hollywood anymore except directors such as the aforementioned Eastwood and Fincher, whereas Villeneuve is no stranger to grim subject matter. His Oscar-nominated Incendies, 2010, involved incestuous rape and religious identity, so a kidnapping may seem like a walk in the park by comparison. Still, this is no easy experience and may leave the viewer disturbed, but nevertheless, with something of dramatic substance to talk about afterward. The weight imbued into the characters is engrossing, and the story itself leaves us equally intrigued and shocked, every emotion along the way flawlessly realized by the wonderful cast. At times a predictable mystery and a familiar plot, Prisoners remains an absorbing, skillfully made drama. Long before Denis Villeneuve wowed a brand new audience with his vision of Dune last year, he'd already directed 4 feature-length films between 1998 and 2010 before taking the helm of Prisoners here, in 2013. In the same year came the release of another collaboration with Jake Gyllenhaal in Enemy, a film I've seen but don't recollect, before bringing us all back up to date with 3 remarkable films that I certainly do remember with great fondness: Sicario in 2015, the remarkably and depressingly brilliant Arrival a year later, before a year later again meeting the Blade Runner fan in me with the sequel to the masterpiece, Blade Runner 2049. I didn't particularly care for Dune, couldn't settle into it, and whilst Sicario is good, Arrival is great, masterpiece category great. So it was, with an evening to spare and a film watching couple of hours needed, that I returned to his creation of nearly a decade ago and was well rewarded by an incredible first hour of a film that I'd completely mistaken for another. You see, the film I remembered took place in a lighthouse, cellar/main rooms, and the tight confines whereby 3 or 4 characters are essentially locked in, and held prisoner, within a lighthouse. A quick cursory glance within the matrix didn't help me track down the mysterious film I'm convinced I watched, as I am equally convinced that the title was very definitely Prisoners. So I was a little perplexed as the opening to this film veered nowhere near a coastal resort or a lighthouse, and I was instead mesmerized by an opening hour of a film that was absolutely stunning but which petered away after the mid-film reveal. But make no mistake, this is still a fine film that jars awkwardly in all the right places. It just wasn't the film that I'm starting to believe my frazzled mind simply made up. Written by Aaron Guzikowski and nominated for a 2014 Academy Award for the incredible cinematography from the already 2-time Oscar winner Roger Deakins, Villeneuve helms a really intriguing film of loss and the incredible heartache no one wishes to experience of dealing with a missing 6 or 7-year-old child. As disturbing as that is, Prisoners is also a film about the loss of humanity, loss of rational thought, loss of perspective, morals, faith, and particularly so a heartbreaking loss of one's own religion, which is the heartbeat of a theme that runs through the entirety of this 153-minute gem. Pray for the best and prepare for the worst, so says Hugh Jackman as the heartbroken devoted husband and father Keller Dover, an equally devoted man of religion who opens the film with a mournful voiceover of the Lord's Prayer. Joining Jackman in a true ensemble cast are Hollywood stars of the past, present and presumably future, with the marquee names of the past all laying claim to real standout headline portrayals of a grieving father and two similarly grieving mothers, Terrence Howard, Viola Davis, and Maria Bello respectively, as well as a thoroughly repugnant police detective, Jake Gyllenhaal, a horrifying portrayal of the chief murder suspect, Paul Dano, and actor Dylan Minnette, who following his cameo here would go on to star in films inflicted upon me by my teenage son, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, Goosebumps, and Don't Breathe, before we came full circle together nearly a decade later with his performance in this year's reincarnation of the Scream franchise. In a film of astounding central performances, it's perhaps Jake Gyllenhaal's portrayal of the gruff and dour detective Loki that steals the show, as his character is so out of character to a supposedly normal portrayal of the sympathetic, empathetic detective on the trail of the two missing girls. Loki is meticulous, driven, a desperate climber within the ranks and, as the film repeatedly endorses, never fails to find his target. But, and I may be misjudging it, his slicked back hair, neck and hand tattoos and top button of a blue shirt always fixed constantly reminded me of a felon/prisoner, and perhaps that was the point. But what arguably wasn't or isn't is Gyllenhaal's remarkable performance of cold dead-eyed stares of disdainful dispassionate annoyance at any and everyone around him. Despite the heartbreaking day-by-day countdown and fading possibility as to any possible rescue attempt, Loki's scowls and mannerisms barely change in a performance perfectly in keeping with a very off-kilter film. After being totally blown away by the current epic Blade Runner 2049, I decided to pick up and screen a copy of Prisoners, 2013, one of Villeneuve's earlier movies. A rainy, gloomy, but joyous Thanksgiving afternoon quickly morphed into two parents' worst nightmare, the disappearance and abduction of their children. What followed for the next 2 hours and 33 minutes was perhaps the most intense and gut-wrenching movie that you will ever see, and the intensity never let up throughout the entire film. Most of the film centered on the investigation by Lt. Loki, Jake Gyllenhaal, and his interaction with potential witnesses and suspects. A parallel story developed when one of the parents, Keller Dover, decided to take matters into his own hands. Prisoners, 2013, deserves to be mentioned with films like Silence of the Lambs and Seven. It was just that chilling and riveting. It is the kind of movie that will stay with you long after you watch it. Denis Villeneuve made yet another movie that is richly layered but not overly complex. The cinematography by Roger Deakins was beautiful, from the battleship gray and seemingly always raining or snowy skies, down to the ugly drapes and the harvest gold appliances and teapot in Holly Jones's house. Aaron Gozikowski's screenplay was not perfect, yet he wove a story that was somewhat predictable but still quite intriguing. Religious themes, oh boy, neither God nor religious faith fared well at all in this movie. We had a local priest who was on the sex offenders registry. Loki found him passed out drunk on the floor of his house, with a bound and gagged dead and decaying body in his basement. Keller Dover, a religious and devoted family man, totally went off the rails after the two girls disappeared. He embraced unimaginable evil, torturing a boy who was himself a victim. These scenes were as incredible as they were difficult to watch, but even the transformed Keller was not the most evil character in this disturbing movie. Holly Jones and her husband were deeply religious evangelicals until they lost their son to cancer. They then turned to unthinkable evil. Making children disappear is the war we wage on God, coldly stated Holly Jones. Turns them into demons like you. More on Holly Jones later, but she needs to be in my movie villain article as one of the most ruthless female villains of all time. Yes, and if things were not bad enough, there were snakes too. There were religious symbols everywhere, and these symbols represented the real story in this movie. It was not merely a story about the devastating kidnapping and disappearance of two young girls. This movie highlighted how humans facing adversity sometimes became terribly lost and cannot determine right from wrong, or morality from immorality. Morality becomes an impossible maze. Prisoners was a near masterpiece. There were many levels of imprisonment in this great movie, both physical and psychological. Villeneuve took the horrible specter of every parent's nightmare and made it much, much worse. The flaws of the ultra-religious and over-the-top paranoid preppers and survivalists were exposed and decimated. Prisoners was a dark and haunting experience that you will never forget. If you are looking for an uplifting experience and happy endings, this movie will not be for you. If you enjoy fine cinema that will make you squirm and think about the consequences of moral ambiguity, Prisoners may be for you, but I doubt if you will want to watch it more than once. Denis Villeneuve's mystery thriller Prisoners begins with the words of the Our Father, spoken in voiceover as a father goes hunting with his son. I'm sure many Catholics have the same thought process I have when I see a moment like this in a mainstream Hollywood movie. First, intrigue. How is my religion going to factor into this movie? Then, almost immediately after, some nerves. Oh no. How is my religion going to factor into this movie? Rest assured, Catholics, for those that can handle it, Prisoners is a thoughtful and moving film well worth the harrowing journey. The man praying the Our Father is Keller Dover, Hugh Jackman, a typical working-class guy who loves his family. During a Thanksgiving celebration with another family, his young daughter and the other family's daughter are kidnapped. As the investigation, led by Detective Loki, Jake Gyllenhaal, drags on without success, Keller gets more desperate and unhinged. He kidnaps the man that he's convinced kidnapped the girls, a mentally disabled young man played by Paul Dano, and tortures him, thinking he can get information out of him. Meanwhile, Detective Loki grows more and more suspicious of Keller. Jackman is magnificent in what is possibly a career-best performance, portraying his character's journey from everyman to monster in a moving and realistic way. Gyllenhaal is totally dialed in as an intense detective whose tactics are of dubious morality and legality, but whose heart is essentially in the right place. Gyllenhaal seems to be at his best when he's in investigation mode, cf. Zodiac, Nightcrawler, The Guilty. Dano also does what he does best, which is to be a little weird. Solid performances from Viola Davis, David Dastmalchian, and Melissa Leo round out a uniformly excellent cast. Villeneuve's direction displays an impeccable ability to ratchet up the tension and intrigue constantly until the movie explodes into a climax of hellish intensity. All the technical aspects contribute to an overwhelming sense of unease and dread, particularly Roger Deakins' cinematography and Johan Johansson's music. The music is so heartbreakingly beautiful that it sticks in my head and I get sad just thinking about it. But for the Catholic viewer, it's Aaron Guzikowski's script that is really noteworthy, shot through as it is with Catholic symbolism. Beyond the opening voiceover, the Our Father returns, in a crucial scene when Keller is attempting to pray but can't finish the prayer, due to his inability to potentially forgive his daughter's kidnapper. This, as well as him praying the Act of Hope prayer, makes me think that Keller is some kind of Catholic, like Guzikowski himself. On the other hand, Loki wears a Freemason ring, a detail I didn't notice until this most recent viewing. One is reminded that believers and non-believers alike are sinners who commit unspeakably horrible acts, and who need grace and redemption. At the same time, both believers and non-believers can be raised up by God to do His will despite their imperfections. Think of Samson or Cyrus the Great, for example. In the end, Keller's brutal actions are not rewarded. In fact, he is punished quite intensely in a literal sort of descent into hell, or at least purgatory. It is Loki who is able to claim credit for solving the case, but not even this is entirely through his own merits. J.R.R. Tolkien coined the term eucatastrophe to refer to the major reversal from bad fortune to good fortune, like the crucial arrival of the eagles in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Tolkien knew that what looks like random chance, coincidence, deus ex machina to the unbeliever is really part of a grand design, and full of meaning and purpose. And this is why I love Prisoners. Truth be told, this is the only movie that I've ever had to pause and take a break from because of its intensity, and I almost didn't go back and finish it. But I'm so glad I did. Because even in the midst of all the brutality and brokenness and violence, there is a moment of grace and redemption. Even amidst the darkness of this world there is still a glimmer of light. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light, those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. Isaiah. Value to a Catholic audience 4, excellent. Though with the strong caveat that the film is incredibly shocking, brutal, bleak, and sad for huge portions of its runtime. Certainly only appropriate for adults, and I'm not sure how many adults could stomach this. I was prepared to think little of Prisoners, a film I'd heard little about prior to watching, even though the named cast looked pretty solid on paper. Hugh Jackman and Terrence Howard teaming up to solve the mystery of their daughter's disappearance. Throw in Maria Bello, an uber creepy Paul Dano, and Oscar-winning Melissa Leo and you have me hooked already. Prisoners comes along at the perfect time for a kidnapping story, really, given the public reception given to the 2013 Ariel Castro case, where 3 young girls were found alive after being snatched nearly a decade previous. This film never associates with that story, and neither should it, but as an emotional touchstone for those watching, it's hard not to think about the reality, while appreciating this fiction. The snatching of children, especially, makes most adults cringe in fear. What if it was your child? How far would you go to get them back? To what level would you stoop to find them, make them safe again? These are only some of the questions Prisoners throws up, as its horrible, horrible story unfolds like a slowly wrung wet towel of emotional torture. Prisoners isn't an easy film to watch, how could it be, really, and it asks, nay, demands, a lot of those who settle down to watch it. Dark, dank, and most assuredly depressing for the majority of its 150 minutes, it would be easy to dismiss this film as just another crime thriller, throw it on the pile and leave it there. Yet, as much as I was prepared to be dismissive of it, Prisoners is one out of the box. It's fantastic. Keller Dover, Hugh Jackman, is a deeply religious man running a struggling carpentry business in Pennsylvania. His wife, Grace, Maria Bello, son Ralph, Dylan Minette, and young daughter Anna, Aaron Gerasimovic, are invited to spend Thanksgiving night at their nearby neighbors, the Birch family. Franklin Birch, Terrence Howard, and his wife Nancy, Viola Davis, have 2 daughters, the eldest Eliza, Zoe Board, and Joy, Kyla Drew Simmons. As their evening progresses, Anna and Joy return to the Dovers' house. They never make it, for when Keller and Grace arrive home, the 2 girls are nowhere to be found. Fearing the worst, Keller calls the police, and local detective Loki, Jake Gyllenhaal, attends the scene. The chief suspect is the driver of an old RV spotted nearby over the day, and when the police locate it, they take the driver, Alex Jones, Paul Dano, into custody. However, Alex has the mental capacity of a 10-year-old, leaving the police no choice but to release him after no evidence of a crime is found. Keller, confronting Alex at the police station, finds that the man does indeed know about the kidnappings, and imprisons him inside a room at his late father's old home, now abandoned at the edge of town. There, Keller and an unwilling Franklin torture and assault Alex into giving them the location of their daughters. Meanwhile, Detective Loki continues his lines of inquiry into the kidnapping, eventually locating another suspect. As Alex's life hangs in the balance, Keller tries to gain information from the man's mother, Holly, Melissa Leo, who is apparently none the wiser as to her adopted son's activities. The central conceit to Prisoners is undoubtedly Keller Dover's unlawful imprisonment, and torture of, a suspect in his daughter's kidnapping. In black and white, this scenario is wrong in so many ways, and civil libertarians would cry foul were the film to try and portray this as any kind of justification for violent vigilantism. Prisoners doesn't try and make what Keller does seem right, or wrong. It simply portrays the situation as a desperate father trying to find his daughter, the only way he can. Yet it forces us to ask ourselves, how far would we go, what level of inhumane behavior would we stoop to, in order to save the life of a loved one? Frankly, the question disturbs me, because I hate to think of what I would do were I in a similar scenario, It's scary because I don't think I'd be able to restrain myself either. A core issue in any kidnapping is the helplessness of those left behind. The families of people missing, taken, or lost must go through absolute hell not knowing what has become of their loved one, and I can only imagine the anger, grief, and rage that these people might go through. Prisoners asks a lot of its audience. This isn't an easy film to watch. Paul Dano's character, Alex, is tortured in some of the most brutal ways possible, and it makes for uncomfortable viewing, even in light of the fact that he's a key suspect in such an ugly case. Which in turn makes us feel uncomfortable, in that we don't want to see him suffer if only he'd reveal certain information to Keller, in order to stop the violence. Keller's rage is understandable, even appreciated in some aspects, and it's this confronting dynamic that makes Prisoners as unsettling as it is. Oh, there's plenty of other material within this film to make your skin crawl, your blood boil and your head to shake, but that's the bit that struck a chord with me. Don't expect an easy watch, here. Prisoners isn't a friendly, nice, happy-la-da-da film where the good guys triumph and the bad guys get their comeuppance with ease. There are no good or bad guys here, really, only shades of grey. Speaking of grey, Prisoners is easily one of the most melancholic-looking films I've seen all year. Draped in drab, grey rain, filmed in what appears to be some kind of torrential downpour that never let up for months, and directed with a steady, sure hand, Prisoners is utterly depressing in a weird kind of mesmerizing way. You just can't look away, no matter how much you want to. Legendary DP Roger Deakins, the man who lensed Oh Brother Where Art Thou, The Shawshank Redemption and 2012's Skyfall, gives this film a dark, menacing visual palette that soaks up all color and drains away all hope, accentuating the story superbly, and I think it's some of his best work yet. The director, Canadian-born Denis Villeneuve, provides the solid script and polished acting with a terrific canvas on which to perform. This film is slow, but never boring, menacing without being overt, and thrilling without any action sequences. Violence is portrayed as an ugly thing, it's never glossed over or made to look cool, it simply is what it is. The pacing, something younger viewers will no doubt have a problem with here, allows the story to breathe and the characters to develop, which is sorely needed considering the anguished depths they must descend to in order to convey this narrative's emotional angst. Prisoners never feel slow or drawn out, however, meaning Villeneuve has done a superb job of capturing your brain fully for the few hours he has with it. The cast are all excellent, especially Hugh Jackman, who provides the raw beating heart of the story as the angry, frustrated father who has no control over his daughter's disappearance. Jackman provides Keller with a tangible reality, rather than just a furious father hell-bent on revenge, making his character's actions somewhat, I hesitate to use the word acceptable, but it's somehow appropriate, considering. I know I'm no good at predicting these things, but Jackman's work here is of Oscar caliber, make no mistake. Co-stars Jake Gyllenhaal, as Detective Loki, and Terrence Howard, as Keller's neighbor and friend, are dynamite, Gyllenhaal especially, providing ample counterbalance to Jackman's powerful performance. Gyllenhaal makes Loki a dedicated, driven detective, who doesn't give up even when he feels like he probably should. The character isn't written with any glamour or attitude to him, he's just an ordinary man doing the best he can under horrible circumstances. While Jackman and Gyllenhaal have limited screen time together, they both carry this thing nearly equally, as opposing forces working toward a common goal. Maria Bello is solid yet underwritten as Keller's wife, as is Viola Davis as Franklin's, while Paul Dano is extra creepy here as Alex. Melissa Leo once again provides a chameleon-like performance as Alex's mother, softly spoken yet weirdly menacing all at the same time, as if there's something off about her that doesn't quite jibe through the movie. You could throw a blanket across the entire cast and not find a poor showing here, and the film is the better for it. I found myself comparing, perhaps unfairly, this film to another recent crime thriller I watched, the Nick Cage flick The Frozen Ground, which has essentially a similar plotline save for the torture of a suspect in a crime. Comparing films is a fast road to an argument, no argument there, I might add, but what struck me most about this, and about Frozen Ground, is that regardless of whether a story is based in truth or not, Prisoners is entirely a fiction, but it could very well not be. The primary motivator for a successful crime flick is either the characters, or the mystery. Prisoners has both these things working in its favor. The mystery, did Alex do it, or not, and the characters, Keller's hopeless flailing about in search of answers, Gyllenhaal's desire to see this thing through, are well written and superbly filmed, ensuring the quality of the film overall is as high as possible. Is Prisoners an Oscar-worthy film? Hard to say, although I'd certainly give it a few dollars each way to take home an acting gong for Jackman. I hardly think the Academy will reward a film about a kidnapping, although they did give it to a silent film only a few years ago. Whether it strikes a blow during award season, or misses out, Prisoners is a near faultless crime thriller that lives, breathes and bleeds for its characters and its story. And that, my friends, makes it a winner in my book. Though at first glance the pick would appear to have little in common with his previous work, Villeneuve has long shown an interest in the psychological and emotional consequences of violence, as evidenced by 2009's serenely chilling, black and white Polytechnique, about a real-life Canadian mass shooting, and especially 2010's Oscar-nominated Incendies, which Prisoners echoes in its fragmented central mystery and its theme of the good and ill transmitted from parents to children. But in every respect, the new film finds Villeneuve working on his biggest and most ambitious canvas to date and, perhaps most impressive, flawlessly catching the moods and mores of small-town, God-fearing America. The movie announces its measured, quietly confident tone right from the opening scene of a father-son deer hunting trip, the first of many images of predators pursuing their prey. "Be ready," says the father, Pennsylvania carpenter Keller Dover, Jackman, to the teenage boy, Dylan Minette, a crucifix dangling from the rear-view mirror, a late autumn chill hanging in the air. Back at home, where Keller's wife, Grace, Maria Bello, and 6-year-old daughter, Anna, Aaron Gerasimovic, safely await his return, the basement is stocked with enough emergency provisions for a nuclear holocaust. Among other things, Prisoners is very much a movie about what people have in their basements. All the canned goods in the world, however, cannot shield the Dovers from what is about to happen next. Theirs is the kind of quaint suburban street where people walk over to the neighbor's house for Thanksgiving dinner and feel relatively insulated from the world's violent ills. Yet it is during just such a Thanksgiving that Anna wanders off unsupervised along with 7-year-old Joy, the daughter of family friends Nancy and Franklin Birch, Viola Davis and Terrence Howard, respectively. By dessert, both have vanished without a trace. The only clue, earlier in the day, the girls were seen playing around a camper van parked in front of a vacant house down the road, the faint sound of a radio suggesting that someone was inside, patiently watching. Dead. Loki, Jake Gyllenhaal, is spending his Thanksgiving alone, flirting with the waitress in a lonely Chinese diner, when he first responds to the case. In the best film noir manner, rain is sheeting down, and the camera of the great DP Roger Deakins, who has shot the film in wintry blues and blacks with an expressionist edge, pushes in slowly from behind. Loki, we are told, has never failed to solve a case, though this is at odds with the man's solemn demeanor, his haunted gaze and the elaborate tattoos jutting out from his collar suggesting reserves of private rage. Compare this to the eager beaver murder sleuth Gyllenhaal played in David Fincher's Zodiac and the full breadth of his impressive range immediately comes into focus. The camper van is soon located along with its owner, a gangly, inarticulate man-child named Alex, played to creepy perfection by Paul Dano, who lives with his aunt, Melissa Leo, in the kind of rundown, cluttered tract house where serial killers and other movie deviants tend to reside. But awareness of such familiar tropes and awareness of our awareness of them is one of Prisoners' canny strengths. So it turns out that Alex is not the kidnapper, or at least, that there's no physical evidence tying him to the scene and the police are forced to let him go. Which is when Keller, who's as sure as we are that Alex is guilty, takes matters into his own hands, abducting the suspect and chaining him up in an abandoned apartment building that belonged to his father. The movie's tally of kidnappers now stands at 2. And the puzzle of prisoners has only just begun to assemble. Following a lead to the home of an elderly priest, Len Cariou, Loki discovers a rotting corpse in a hidden cellar. Then, at exactly the 1-hour mark, another shifty young man appears on the scene, triggering a whole new set of suspicions. All the while, Alex sits in hock, violently tortured and interrogated by Keller, who tells his wife he's off helping the police, in an effort to discern the girl's whereabouts. With each successive revelation, Guzikowski's brilliant script satisfies the necessary machinations while always flowing effortlessly from his vivid, multi-dimensional characters. That delicate balance extends to Villeneuve's direction, which maintains a vice-like grip on the viewer without ever resorting to cheap shock effects or compromising the integrity of the human drama. Yet this is also a film that breathes, that knows it has the audience in its palm and can take time out for the kind of incidental, character-deepening scenes that usually end up on the cutting room floor. In less assured hands, a movie called Prisoners with a plot like this would be an invitation to disaster, heavy on self-conscious allegory, symbolism, and moral debate. Everyone, don't you see, is a prisoner of something, of time, of grief, of his own psyche. In Villeneuve's, nothing is belabored, the thorny questions of right and wrong bubbling under the surface without ever being declaimed. Jackman has simply never been better than as this true believer forced to question his beliefs. Effortlessly, the Australian actor projects a solid, rugged Americanness, the acme of a man whose home is his castle and who sees himself as his family's protector. It is a performance void of vanity or the desire to be loved by the audience, and moment to moment it is exhilarating to watch. In just a handful of scenes each, Bello and Davis suggest the full, inexpressible weight of motherly grief. Leo, given a role rife with opportunities to ham it up, instead plays things with the sober conviction of a disappointed life, another standout in a movie with nary a squandered performance in the mix. In addition to Deacon's stellar work, longtime Clint Eastwood editors Joel Cox and Gary Roach have done a formidable job of assembling the pic's densely constructed narrative web. Score by Icelandic composer Jóhann Jóhannsson, also making his big studio debut, strikes just the right haunting, mournful notes. When the police take time to find Keller Dover's daughter and her friend, he decides to go on a search himself. His desperation leads him closer to finding the truth and also jeopardizes his own life. I am not a fan of Villeneuve's earlier movies, especially his thrillers. I prefer his science fiction efforts. Prisoners is just another example of a Villeneuve thriller that simply doesn't work. The fact that it got such strong reviews is mind-boggling to me when there is almost nothing special about it. The only legitimate reason to see this movie at all is for the superb acting performances. Viola Davis and Maria Bello are both very good, but their roles are quite small. Melissa Leo was fine in a villain role, but I did not love this character whatsoever and I found the twists and turns toward the end to be uninteresting. Jake Gyllenhaal is fantastic as the policeman and very believable in the role. He brought a lot of charisma to this underwritten role. The same goes for Hugh Jackman. He is the star of this picture. He brought so much vulnerability and emotional complexity to this psychologically damaged and heartbroken father. His arc is the only truly great thing in this film. But other than those performances, Prisoners meanders throughout its extremely long runtime, slow pace, and uninteresting plot points. Needless to say, I quickly got bored with it. The script is very mediocre. It never fully explores the plight of parents in these types of situations, nor does it deal with the complexities of its scenarios well. This is the type of movie that is all about the dread and not the thrills, which I am personally not in favor of. The movie is extremely dreary and lacking in entertainment factor while still not being sophisticated enough to pull off its dark tone and themes. The cinematography is fine, but Roger Deakins shot so many better looking films throughout his career. The editing, directing, and writing are all only serviceable in this very dull and cold film. If you ever want to see Hugh Jackman at his very best performance, I would debate this would be the movie you need to see. Mind you, this is not an easy movie to watch, but it's so well made and its characters are so compelling that it's difficult to stop watching it. There's so many great performances in here, and yet the most twisted thing about this film is how the plot begins, builds, and slowly burns before giving you one hell of a revealing ending. You should watch this one yourself. Prisoners, 2013, was directed by Denis Villeneuve and written by Aaron Guzikowski. Two families get together for Thanksgiving. Keller, Hugh Jackman, and Grace Dover, Maria Bello, are good friends with Franklin, Terrence Howard, and Nancy Berth, Viola Davis. Their two little girls are best friends and their teenage kids get along as well. Everything seems ideal until the two little girls go missing. As a result, a full search starts as Detective Loki, Jake Gyllenhaal, enters the picture. One of the teenagers remembers the little girls playing near an old RV. When police track down the vehicle, the driver tries to flee and the police end up arresting him only to let him go later. This seems to trigger something in Keller that unhinges him. As leads start to become thinner, Keller tries to take justice into his own hands. That's where we're going to stop. The movie basically takes you on a strange turn that would seem enough to give it meat, but it does not stop there. Yes, it is brutal what happens and what Keller ends up becoming for the sake of finding his child, but contrary to what other movies might want you to think, his actions do him more harm than good. As the pressure mounts and the movie slowly burns down its leads, we're not aware that we ourselves are being given clues and small facts that will tie into the truth. When it all seems like the very last act is one of frustration and accepting there's nothing more to do, we are slowly exposed to increasing reveals that a few things that seemed random are connected. As much as I'd like to say more, the fact is we're going down a roller coaster of a reveal. The last act of this film is a mind-bender of a reveal, a twist and a desperate ending. This is one of those cases in which you want to walk away from how dark this film gets, but you should hang on to see what's about to be revealed. Strongly recommended with reservations. The movie is great overall, but it does go to very dark places. The performances are engaging, the characters feel real and solid, the mystery itself has legs, and it almost feel like we're watching a real case. The last act is such a great satisfying conclusion as clues start adding up. The ending scene is also fitting to the theme. You kind of want to revisit the film itself to see the whole thing from a different angle, but it's raw and dark enough the first time around. Worth a watch, but it's not an easy one. Once you get started, it's harder to stop watching. Every so often a movie comes around that just looks interesting, but you are not prepared for just how stunning it truly is. It just seems like another good thriller that might be nicely satisfying, but this movie is far and beyond such meager expectations. Prisoners attracted me because I really love Hugh Jackman. He has such a genuine depth of humanity and intense screen presence in so much of what he does, but even then, I didn't expect a performance and a film on this level of masterful brilliance. How far would you go to protect your family? Keller Dover, Hugh Jackman, is facing every parent's worst nightmare. His 6-year-old daughter, Anna, is missing, together with her young friend, Joy, and as minutes turn to hours, panic sets in. The only lead is a dilapidated RV that had earlier been parked on their street. Heading the investigation, Detective Loki, Jake Gyllenhaal, arrests its driver, Alex Jones, Paul Dano, but a lack of evidence forces his release. As the police pursue multiple leads and pressure mounts, knowing his child's life is at stake, the frantic Dover decides he has no choice but to take matters into his own hands. But just how far will this desperate father go to protect his family? Brought to us by director Denis Villeneuve, Prisoners is undoubtedly the best film I have seen all year. A tight, taut, suspenseful, and engrossing thriller that hits powerful emotional chords everywhere. If you thought the trailers gave too much away, you are very mistaken. There is so much more substance and plot nuances that a trailer could never accurately convey. Surely, I will not spoil anything for you, but the mystery of this film is cunningly devised with intelligent turns and a remarkable progression. There are many fine layers of character, emotion, and story here that interweave perfectly and beautifully. We are treated to so many well-fleshed-out characters inhabiting a story of very intense emotions and radical, unsettling violent actions with nerve-wracking consequences. You feel every ounce of emotion from these characters, and Villeneuve's direction shines gloriously in every detail. I also love that nothing in this film is a red herring. Every lead, every piece of evidence, every detail adds to the puzzle, which is brilliantly plotted out from a stunningly well-written screenplay by Aaron Guzikowski. Prisoners is meticulously mapped out every step of the way, and Villeneuve utilizes all of that emotion and strategic, deliberate pacing to absorb you into the movie. The cinematographer for this film was Roger Deakins, who also shot Skyfall, which was immaculate work, and he does not falter here at all. I was constantly struck by the quality of the compositions as they all hold so much weight. Villeneuve has this shot and edited in a very conservative manner so that the substance of every frame soaks into the viewer so deeply. Early on, I love how fairly brief scenes are played out in wide masters to give you a dramatic and stoic impact on the story. The inspired cinematography constantly envelops the screen, translating the dramatic power of Villeneuve's cinematic narrative in such exquisite detail and poignancy. The quality of the visuals, how the film is shot, and the style of editing constantly made me feel like this was a very 1970s thriller with a modern polish. Even the earth-toned color palette reflects that, and the autumn/winter setting adds to the grim, somber atmosphere. Every technical quality of this movie is used to suck you into the depth of what transpires. Even the score is immensely effective, yet subtle. Everything just works with such precision to excellent effect. I honestly believe that Hugh Jackman could possibly earn himself some accolades come awards season time. My faith in his talent has been paid off time and again, and I love seeing him in these gritty, hard-hitting dramatic films. Keller Dover is a man who believes in preparing for the worst while praying for the best, and so, he is used to doing everything possible to protect his family from all dangers. When he feels he must take matters into his own hands, the emotional intensity of the film escalates drastically. Jackman is intensely powerful in this role, pushing himself to that extra level that separates great from extraordinary. Pure, raw emotion pours out of him as Keller Dover struggles with doing the right thing for his daughter, even though it is the worst, most unimaginable thing he's ever done. The absolute conviction of what he believes he must do penetrates right through the screen, right into your soul. This film constantly pushes this character into further emotionally and morally strained situations that challenge Jackman to deliver on higher and higher levels, which he exceeds over and over again. This is why I love Hugh Jackman and why I was drawn to seeing this movie. He's an incredibly relatable and engaging acting talent who pulls you in based on his depth of humanity, and that is gorgeously on display here in a masterfully crafted film. Now, I haven't seen Jake Gyllenhaal in anything since Donnie Darko, and it's great seeing him in a mature, hard-edge role. He is really solid as this vehemently dedicated cop who maintains a level head while remaining fully committed to this case. I love seeing how Detective Loki handles the strained, heated emotions of the Dovers and Birches, and how he manages everything with meticulous perceptiveness and a dogged mentality. It's a wonderfully written character that empathizes with these hurting people and conveys his confidence with sincerity. Gyllenhaal is intensely compelling and intriguing to watch as the film progresses. From the moment he's introduced, eating alone at a Chinese restaurant on Thanksgiving, he is complex and unique. I like the nuances added into his character, such as the various small tattoos on his hands and neck. They give him a darker, grittier edge along with Gyllenhaal's sort of dark aura. Yet, he is not a dark character, but is a riveting one that adds his own intensity to the narrative. This is also a marvelous performance that only becomes more fascinating and gripping as the film progresses. The rest of the cast is equally as powerful. Mario Bello's character of Grace Dover deals with this frightening tragedy of her abducted daughter by falling apart, relying on medication, and just becoming a mess. It's a pure visceral deterioration of a person torn apart by fear and pain for a loved one. Terrence Howard is another actor I just love, and he delivers such vulnerability. The struggle Franklin Birch faces when Keller pulls him into the abduction and torture of Alex Jones is a perfectly human conflict. He wants his daughter back so badly, but almost can't reconcile the morality of what he and Keller are doing to this man with the IQ of a 10-year-old. The dynamics between all of these characters and their passionate, pained emotions is magnificent to behold. Even Paul Dano makes you empathize so deeply for Alex. You are never certain whether he is responsible for anything at all, or that Keller is torturing a completely innocent man. The story twists around so beautifully, wrapping everyone up in this complex tapestry that any truth is possible. Even more so, nothing is all that clean-cut for any suspect, and no one is completely innocent. Everyone has something shameful, shady, or tragic which shows that these are real, textured, flawed people. Every character is written and performed with such substance and rawness that you can never take anything for granted or predict where the story will lead you. I was constantly pleased with the sophistication of storytelling here. There were times I was a tad apprehensive that the payoff of the mystery, or that the identity of the abductor would be spoiled too soon. Instead, it was another element of the puzzle being laid out carefully with surprising, unexpected, yet entirely purposeful turns. As I said, nothing is a swerve. You're not led down a frivolous path to a false lead. Everything introduced in this story is there for a substantial reason. The ultimate reveal is great, allowing for everything to really fall into place, and put certain characters into further, tenser jeopardy. I loved how the final act unfolds. There's real danger at hand, and nothing proceeds remotely like a cliché. This is a fresh, smart thriller that will captivate your attention for its entire 146-minute runtime. One would think that a deliberately paced thriller with that kind of runtime would lag somewhere or feel drawn out, but Prisoners makes amazingly solid use of every minute of screen time to progress every element of story and character to its ultimate, immensely satisfying and brilliant conclusion. Denis Villeneuve has just come out of nowhere for me, and now, he has my undivided attention. Prisoners is absolutely perfect. There is not a single aspect of it for me to criticize, only praise. This is an incredible cast delivering amazingly powerful and raw performances in a rattling and haunting thriller. I have never stated in a review of a newly released movie that it is the best one I have seen all year, because you never know what else could surprise you in the remainder of that year. However, I cannot imagine what else is possibly going to steal away that title from Prisoners, because it is that stunningly impressive without a flaw in sight. Do yourself a great favor and see this movie and support it. I hope you are as enthralled with it as I was. Kidnapping thrillers often lull us into a sense of safety in the opening sequences, showing the normal rhythms of life that will soon be shattered. Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners does not go that route. It opens with a shot of a snowy forest, where a deer quietly noses around for food. Into the frame comes the barrel of a shotgun. We hear a prayer being intoned. Boom, the deer goes down. The camera pulls back to show a father, Hugh Jackman, and teenage son, Dylan Minnette, in day-glow hunting gear staring at their kill through the ranks of bare trees. On the drive home, the father, who seems humorless, intense, and a bit of a bore, lectures the son on how to always be prepared for the worst in life. This opening is so heavy-handed that it's amazing that the film doesn't instantly collapse under its symbolic weight. Shot by the great Roger Deakins, regular cinematographer for the Coen brothers, the movie is drenched in rain and drained of color. Aspects of Prisoners are effective, but for the most part it's rather ridiculous, despite the fact that it clearly wants to be taken super seriously, and there's an overwrought quality to much of the acting. Keller Dover, Jackman, is an independent contractor who lives with his wife Grace, Maria Bello, and 2 kids in a suburban neighborhood. He loves Bruce Springsteen, the Star-Spangled Banner, hunting and hoarding canned goods, gas masks, and survivalist gadgets in his basement. On Thanksgiving, the Dovers go to dinner with a neighboring family, Franklin and Nancy Birch, Terrence Howard and Viola Davis, who have 2 kids the same age. While the parents drink wine and talk in the living room, the 2 little girls ask if they can take a walk. It is a walk from which they do not return. Panic ensues, especially when it becomes clear that a creepy RV, which had been seen parked in the neighborhood earlier, has vanished. Detective Loki, Jake Gyllenhaal, is assigned to the case. The RV's owner, Alex Jones, Paul Dano, is dragged in for questioning. Forensics say the RV is clean of physical evidence, but Alex is strange. He speaks in a whispery high voice that makes him sound like a preteen. It is not inconceivable to think that he may be hiding something. This is clearly Dover's take, and he and Loki immediately start to butt heads about the course of the investigation. When Jones is released due to lack of evidence, into the custody of his aunt, played by Melissa Leo, Dover takes matters into his own hands, kidnapping Jones and holding him hostage in an abandoned dilapidated building. Dover loops in Franklin Birch on his plan to beat the truth out of Jones. Birch is horrified at the sight of Jones tied to a sink, but he ignores his own moral compass in the face of Dover's furious certainty. This is one of the subtler points of the script, how certainty can override doubt with sheer force, and how doubt is often essential to maintaining our humanity. Hugh Jackman huffs and puffs and screams and roars throughout the film, and it becomes monotonous, but what all that behavior tells us is that this is a weak man who needs to feel powerful. In one telling moment, while murmuring the Our Father, he is unable to say as we forgive those who trespass against us. He has a veritable arsenal in his basement. His family could withstand a mustard gas attack as well as the zombie apocalypse, but he couldn't protect his daughter on a simple walk through a safe neighborhood. And he's so convinced that Alex Jones is the guy that he is blind to other possibilities. Meanwhile, his wife lies in bed, tranquilizing herself into a stupor. Gyllenhaal is great here in a role that must have looked rather uninteresting on the page. Aaron Guzikowski's script, so packed with religious symbols that verges on a sermon, is excellent in its spare and compelling portrait of Loki. The only image of the character outside the context of his job is his introductory scene, eating Thanksgiving dinner in an empty, fluorescent-lit Chinese restaurant as the rain batters down outside. The only thing we learn about his past is that he was in a boys' home and was raised in foster care. His knuckles and neck are sprinkled with tattoos, including a cross on one thumb. He's got a facial tic. We meet a lot of creeps in Prisoners, and you get the sense that Detective Loki could have been one of them if he hadn't become a cop. It's a nice performance from Gyllenhaal, and its subtlety is welcome considering all the teeth gnashing going on in other performances. Director Villeneuve gives us a couple of truly suspenseful scenes. One is a chase through the nighttime backyards of the neighborhood after a candlelight vigil for the two girls. The interiors of the houses seem gloomy and cramped, with walls cutting into the frame and characters coming in and out of sight, a visual correlative for the idea of people cut off from one another. But as the plot goes into high gear and we get other suspects, basement layers, and a glimpse of vast conspiracies, Prisoners wears out its welcome. When Keller Dover's daughter and her friend go missing, he takes matters into his own hands as the police pursue multiple leads and the pressure mounts. But just how far will this desperate father go to protect his family? Prisoners reminds me of two things: why I really don't want a rating system on my blog anymore and how hard it is to write about movies sometimes. Rating this film is particularly pretty hard. It is certainly another excellent film by director Denis Villeneuve. He is the master of suspense, and if serious is your thing, you are bound to love him. He has an ability to slowly build his characters and give you surprising insight to their true colors when you least expect it. The acting is superb. It is particularly easy to associate Hugh Jackman with only Wolverine, but here he proves the layered actor he can be. Keller Dover is a survivalist and a manly man. It is clear he takes pride in the protection of his family, and when his little girl is abducted after a Christmas dinner, he goes to desperate lengths to find her. Jake Gyllenhaal keeps up his plight for me to like him. Detective Loki is assigned to work the case. He's never lost a case and has sharp instincts, but even he is at wit's end when all clues lead to dead ends. There is also something quite sinister or desperate to his character, which is hard to pin down. He's quite clearly very dedicated to his job, but does it with an unhealthy mindless intensity that suggests that the only thing he does have is his job. Then there is Paul Dano and David Dastmalchian, who both give chilling performances. Dano's Alex Jones is a man of limited mental intelligence with an IQ of 10, but he manages to be so damn creepy I couldn't reconcile myself with his innocence. Same goes for Dastmalchian. Bob Taylor is of such character that you need to suspect him. Viola Davis as Nancy Birch does what only Viola Davis can do, tell you a story with her eyes. Her dialogue is always secondary to the convincing way she embodies her character's every mood. She's incredible as a grief-stricken mother of the other little girl who went missing, a stark contrast to the total collapse Grace Dover, Maria Bello, suffers. Another opposite is that of how Franklin Birch, Terrence Howard, deals with the disappearance of his child, compared to manic rage that overpowers Keller. Terrence Howard has tangible grief on screen, and seeing his close friend unravel seems to unnerve him. He's put in a terrible place, to either join in or condone Keller's actions. It is a gray area that no person alive can answer correctly. The plot is complex and winding, and you likely need to watch this more than once to fully understand the story. The plot is every parent's worst nightmare, a child that just disappeared with known sex offenders in the town. The dreary images of a town almost surviving in poverty but not yet there is bleak to behold. The violence is gritty and the atmosphere is tense. The cinematography is phenomenal. My only complaint is this: it feels like it is 400 hours long. Zoe denies this, naturally. The end was just a bit too drawn out, and while I enjoyed the slow pace throughout the film, the slow pace of the last section annoyed me. There was also just a bit of an open ending, which frustrates me endlessly. Aaron Gozikowski's script is unsettling, dark and eerie, a boldly nuanced study in vigilantism, violence as a means to an end, and how far someone is willing to go in the pursuit of following the faith of their convictions. Prisoners delves into the disturbing disappearance of two young girls on Thanksgiving Day. A creepy van had been sighted earlier in the day, the girls wanting to play around it. Within an instant the quiet lives of a quaint suburb are upended, and every event before and after the kidnapping is met with sinister suspicions and thrust under microscopic scrutiny. Keller Dover, Hugh Jackman, is a father on a mission and not buying the police's brush off of his suspicions concerning Alex Jones. Paul Dano, a man that is clearly disturbed. Detective Loki, Jake Gyllenhaal, is on the hunt with his attention split between finding the girls, amid his growing reservations with Keller. What sets Prisoners apart is the way it brings such a distinct feeling of cold reality into expertly dreary focus by staying short on character details. The audience is walking into the lives of these people just as the unthinkable occurs. Everything that happens from this point is discovered in a natural fashion. There's no phony rundown of the background for every character, no elaborate detailing or answer given to every question posed throughout its runtime, concerning every subtle revelation. The film provokes curiosity, engaging the audience in a probing analysis of why, who and how. In the arena of mystery, it captivates on multiple levels. Denis Villeneuve's taut direction is gripping and seamlessly haunting. The subject matter being so grim, it becomes increasingly difficult to watch the film's story unfold. The raw reality that Villeneuve captures, touches on the onslaught of similar stories that have played out on 24/7 cable news channels. Prisoners presents with a queasy subtext that does not allow for the typical hope that springs from similar fare. It is unflinching and drives viewers towards one of the most uncertain conclusions in recent memory. This isn't a run-of-the-mill thriller, and that is due to the direction and gritty cinematography. Top-notch performances push the film into an even more profound frontier. Hugh Jackman is transformational as the desperate Keller. His at times stoic restraint made all the more painful by a crumbling emotional state, which is refocused by a fierce internal resolve that allows him to do the civilly unthinkable. Jackman lets Keller's anguish hang on his every facial expression, or lack thereof, and in the third act, he delivers one of the finest turns of his career, in a sobering moment that is searing in its gravity. Jake Gyllenhaal is remarkable as the introspective detective Loki, a role that he imbues with a cold command and interesting physical tics, which hint at a story all on their own. He utilizes the physicality of Loki to elevate him past a stereotypical detective. As the dueling leads dazzle, the supporting cast gives the film exemplary depth. Maria Bello is heartbreaking as the outwardly distraught mother and the dependent wife of Keller, offering yet another of her underrated performances. Viola Davis brings it, in a crucial scene that is strikingly heartfelt as the fellow mother of the missing girls, who faces a grave decision. Paul Dano and Melissa Leo give the film its most unsung edge with turns that keep the audience guessing, engrossed, and in Dano's case, walking the fine line of relevant suspicion. Where this film achieves its greatest glory is in approaching its characters as gray matter. You will not find a definitive good or bad guy, these people are simply human. Pushed to the brink of life's harshest dilemmas and praying for forgiveness afterwards. It is a meditation on faith, both in spirituality and in one's own self. As their moral center stands in the balance, the film makes no judgments. Whether or not it actually implores its audience to do so is a matter of opinion. Certainly after seeing and hearing what they do, one can't cast stones. No one wants to go to the dark places that beg such disturbing questions of our humanity. These are questions one hopes they are never faced with answering. When it comes down to it, Prisoners is an exploration into our native switch and the measures, an unthinkable event, can cause a person to take. Prepare to be taken prisoner, for its moral implications will linger, long after the credits roll. Wanna know something? I'm bored of the Oscars. Last time the Academy Awards moved the needle for me, No Country for Old Men and There Will Be Blood were battling for Best Movie. Movies that are both smart and disturbingly violent are still being made, you know? This year's glaring omission to the Oscars is Prisoners, the first Hollywood venture of Canadian director Denis Villeneuve. I knew Villeneuve was a talented man, but directing important actors into creating an understated, tense and psychologically draining movie was quite the big market upstart for him. Prisoners is a complex movie that requires patience and focus, but that is rewarding every step of the way. Two young girls, Erin Gerasimovich and Kyla Drew Simmons, disappear during a Thanksgiving dinner. They go outside while their parents are having conversation and don't come back. The only lead the police has is a suspicious RV that was parked near the Birch family's house. It's not long before assigned detective Loki, Jake Gyllenhaal, finds the RV and its oh-so-suspicious driver Alex, the wonderful and underrated Paul Dano. When local police is forced to let Alex go due to lack of proofs, one of the missing girls' father Keller Dover, Hugh Jackman, decides to take fate in his own hands and force a confession out of Alex. This only makes the case more complicated for everybody involved as time is playing against the girls. Now, creating such a tense, suffocating movie relies primarily on three things: 1. A great script, 2. Showing restraint in artistic direction, and 3. Great acting. Prisoners has all three variables going for itself. I was the first surprised how major, jack-of-all-trades actors were able to mesh with the movie. Hugh Jackman, in particular, has a sneaky difficult role. He plays a decent, righteous, and emotional man who is not very bright. Most actors would have portrayed one side or the other, yet Jackman embraces the dual nature of his character and creates this fundamentally good guy who you can never really root for. His co-star Jake Gyllenhaal was almost equally impressive as he transformed himself into something foreign to Prince of Persia. Both actors play with a dramatic restraint I didn't know they had. But the showstopper in Prisoners is the bleak, downplayed direction. Denis Villeneuve knows what he's doing. Prisoners is not exactly a sensory overload, yet every frame is savantly studied to draw the maximum from what it is trying to communicate. Bleak lighting, cramped framing, sets that slips details about the characters, things like that. It's something I usually appreciate of the Coen brothers, but Villeneuve does it in Prisoners. Another important point about Prisoners is that it doesn't fall into a common trap of bleak movies. It is not bleak for the sake of being bleak. It keeps its eyes on the prize. It is first and foremost a mystery, and it'll keep you guessing until the very end. I had a great time with Prisoners. It's a stimulating movie that speaks to you as an intelligent person. It's a movie that puts mystery over entertainment, because it trusts its mystery to be entertaining, and rightfully so. It got ignored for the Academy Awards, probably because it's not some pseudo-intellectual, soulful yet safe entertainment. It's a movie that aims to take your soul. It's funny because Denis Villeneuve's Incendies was nominated for an Oscar a few years ago, and it's just about the most gut-wrenching thing. Anyway, like I said, I'm bored with the Oscars. I hope you understand a little better why. Go see Prisoners, it's intense. Recently I have seen myself engrossed in the screen of my laptop watching movies, one of the things I hardly do. I have over 50 movies on my PC, but I never sit and watch any one from the beginning to the end. Every time I try, I'll see myself dozing off. Yesterday, while going through my movie folder, I was captivated by a movie titled Prisoners. I opened it and began to watch. I was carried away by the storyline. It was full of suspense, and I didn't know when I focused till the end of the movie. The movie Prisoners, 2013, a gripping psychological thriller, is directed by Denis Villeneuve. Masterpiece starring Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal. If you enjoy thought-provoking thrillers that leave you emotionally shaken, Prisoners, 2013, deserves a place on your watch list. Directed by Denis Villeneuve and starring Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal, this crime drama shows the extremes of human desperation, especially when love is involved and the blurred line between right and wrong. The movie is set in a quiet Pennsylvania town. The story begins on Thanksgiving Day. Keller Dover, Hugh Jackman, and his wife Grace are celebrating the holiday with their neighbors, the Birches. Tragedy strikes when both families' young daughters go missing without a trace. Detective Loki, Jake Gyllenhaal, takes charge of the investigation. His calm professionalism clashes with Keller's growing panic. When the main suspect, Alex Jones, Paul Dano, is released due to lack of evidence, Keller takes laws into his own hands by secretly kidnapping Alex Jones to an unknown old building, locking him up and beating the hell out of him. All this happened to make him confess to the crime. However, such a decision leads to a shocking moral down. Meanwhile, Roger Deakins' cinematography brings the story to life with haunting beauty. The film's muted color palette, dim lighting, and constant rain reflect the characters' despair. Every frame feels heavy and purposeful, intensifying the suspense without relying on cheap thrills. Villeneuve's direction is slow-burning and meticulous. Instead of fast-paced action, he focuses on emotional tension and psychological realism, creating a chilling atmosphere that grips you from the first scene to the last. Hugh Jackman gives one of his most emotionally charged performances. His portrayal of a father torn between faith and fury feels raw and painfully real. Jake Gyllenhaal, as Detective Loki, offers a quieter but equally compelling presence. His intensity draws you in as he unravels the mystery layer by layer. Supporting performances from Viola Davis, Maria Bello, and Melissa Leo add emotional depth, grounding the story in realism and heartbreak. On its face, Prisoners is an intense, graphic thriller with an elaborate and important commentary on society's failure at every level to address one of the most fundamental moral quandaries of our time. It is also a high-quality piece of Hollywood filmmaking, destined for both critical and box office success on a mainstream level that I strongly suspect will encompass a wide array of perspectives and interpretations that might even miss the larger points the film is trying to raise, including the point that there may be no obvious or easy clear-cut answer to the questions it raises, but that asking these questions and trying to answer them is a process long overdue in our society. Before getting to my full review of the film, let's look at what makes this such a perfect mainstream Hollywood package for such a complex analysis of our dubious moral compasses. All of the elements of a top-notch ticking clock whodunit and revenge fantasy are present, likely to benefit from basic similarities to the emotional appeal of taken parents with missing children who go to extremes to find them, as well as hunt the creepy killer thrillers like The Silence of the Lambs and Zodiac. So far this year, thrillers have been few and far between on the list of top box office performers, as I wrote about in detail just the other day. However, I think Prisoners will be one of the exceptions to that trend. The producers also include some Oscar nominees as well, Broderick Johnson and Andrew Kosabe. It boasts excellent cinematography by Oscar nominee Roger Deakins and editing by Oscar-winning editor Joel Cox. Director Denis Villeneuve's 2010 film, Incendies, was nominated for Best Foreign Language Film at the 83rd Academy Awards. And the film's early buzz as a contender for a Best Picture nomination and impression boosted by strong positive reviews so far will likewise help the film's box office chances. So we're talking about a film with an awful lot of Oscar pedigree, which is always helpful in marketing, especially when some of that pedigree are as widely popular as Hugh Jackman, for example. It all also goes a long way in Oscar campaigns for some nominations that would generate increased attention for the film, which in turn tends to provide a further box office boost. Of course, any nominations that lead to wins would add even more fuel to the box office performance. An opening weekend north of $20+ million seems like a given at this point, as does probable good word of mouth that should add to the positive buzz and help the film's long-term box office prospects. I'm even tempted to say that, with no other wide-release major features opening against it and with Insidious Chapter 2 likely to experience the typical big percentage drop of most horror films in their second weekends, Prisoners has a good shot at an opening in the $30+ million range, depending on how well Insidious Chapter 2 holds. I already mentioned how the Taken comparison could help the film with audiences. It's also worth noting that Taken 2 had a great opening weekend in early October, and enjoyed a big final box office total, besting the first film's impressive run even though it faced some tough competition in its second and third weeks. Obviously the sequel had the benefit of being a known popular brand, but on the other hand it got terrible reviews and had little in the marketing to suggest it was anything more than a rerun of the first film's simple concept and action. This is an imperfect comparison, obviously, but it demonstrates that an R-rated, violent revenge thriller can perform well at this time of year even with bad reviews and weak word of mouth, so Prisoners has reason to hope for an opening on the high end of expectations. So, why do I think audiences will be so impressed with the film? Here's my full review of Prisoners. I love my wife more than life itself. If someone took her or harmed her, there is nothing I wouldn't do to find her. Nothing I wouldn't do to anyone I thought responsible, nothing I wouldn't do to anyone who I thought might know where she was, nothing I wouldn't do to save her and protect her. We all think those things, and we all say them about the people we love. Some say it without really feeling it except as a concept, something apart from their capacity to necessarily act in ways that really reflect a willingness to do anything in order to protect or find a loved one. Others of us feel it to our bones and recognize within ourselves the ability to contradict everything we otherwise say and feel about right and wrong, even fundamental truths at the foundation of our perception of humanity and civil society and the rule of law. Some will say the movie promotes a conservative message defending the use of torture in the face of a rule of law that doesn't serve justice or act quickly enough to save lives during times of crisis. Others will say the film denounces the use of torture as demonstrated by the crumbling of the main character's psyche, as well as the manner in which the extended, detailed portrayal of torture's effects leads the audience to feel sympathy for the victim of torture. I'd say that both claims have some merit, but adhering to one narrow interpretation as either defending or condoning our feelings about torture is missing the film's broader and more important points. It's pointless to argue this is a purely hypothetical situation that doesn't apply to real-life considerations of these themes, because these kinds of crimes happen every single day. And in many instances, it is indeed the passage of time that is the enemy of solving the crime and getting the children back alive. Oftentimes, suspects go free or are overlooked due to limitations in the conduct of law enforcement, be it lack of resources or lack of awareness or lack of probable cause. So much time and effort is put into drug-related enforcement that it inherently detracts from the available energies for other crimes, and there are built-in assumptions in abduction cases that can often work against quickly solving the case or getting victims back alive. I'm not making an argument that torture could make a difference, I'm saying that these types of situations in and of themselves exist. Missing children, lack of adequate law enforcement leads or evidence, suspects who escape initial capture or prosecution, and so on. If we as a society refuse to openly confront the real-life use of torture by our government, to reach a true understanding and honest admission of our culpability as a society in that torture perpetrated on our behalf for the last decade, then here is a cinematic story where we can see a familiar fear closer to home and recognize ourselves in the different positions taken by family members in this story. I suspect most audiences will answer the questions and discuss the complexities openly, in a way we've been unable because we've been unwilling to do when faced with the real-life existence of widespread torture by government and law enforcement. Screenwriter Aaron Gozikowski's plot is paced to set your nerves on edge even in the simple family gathering that opens the story. We get immediate hints that something ominous lurks within the otherwise common, boring little community. Once the children go missing early in the story, the mystery unfolds in a relentless building of tension and puzzle pieces, the sense of the entirely ordinary being tainted by hidden decay and sudden violence that occurs with shocking effect, again, reminding me of that same everyday boring life interrupted by malevolent forces feeling in the best thrillers such as The Silence of the Lambs and Zodiac. Plenty of twists await as the story progresses, most of them quite effective, especially when some previously unclear or outright unnoticed pieces finally fall into place. There is a natural ease to Jake Gyllenhaal's portrayal of a police officer used to solving every case, but now unable to make any headway and slowly losing his composure and sense of control. His early assumptions that he can handle the case and that he has control over the outcome and over himself prove flawed and then false, and he increasingly resents the limitations placed on him by the laws he's sworn to uphold. It's a mirror to Jackman's arc in some ways, while conflicting with it at the same time. Because Gyllenhaal has absolute faith in the rule of law to lead him down the right path eventually, even if his sense of urgency doesn't match that of Jackman. But true rule of law never says at any cost, because the cost inevitably becomes the rule of law itself. The rule of law is in fact the first cost in that situation. But in Jackman's eyes, the cost of adhering to the rule of law will be his child's life. And he's not entirely wrong, since having a democracy and civil society means we make certain compromises, including the fact that our laws protecting against abuse of authority matter most in the cases where we're tempted to apply them the least. It's easy to say don't abuse a suspect we think might really be innocent or don't infringe speech that's popular. It's the most unpopular speech, the most vile criminal suspects, who represent the truest tests of our commitment to the rule of law. Prisoners argues that most of us fail that test, if we are completely honest with ourselves, when it comes to applying those principles to ourselves. And this failure isn't just in literal examples of our own claims to being willing to torture someone who we think has taken our children. Terrence Howard, in a tremendous performance worth a Best Supporting Actor nod, and Viola Davis, as the parents of one of the two missing girls, give powerful performances reflecting different aspects of these broad viewpoints, condemning torture and recognizing every reason it's wrong and pointless, yet lacking the strength to take the steps necessary to put an end to it. In a relatively brief but heartbreaking turn as Jackman's wife, suffers complete breakdown after her daughter vanishes. She cannot face the reality of the situation, and she pulls back from it and fantasizes that her daughter will come back home any time now, but she knows in her heart that she's fooling herself, so she sinks into a drug-induced haze from sleeping pills and some sort of antidepressants. Her perception of a safe world is shattered, as is her blind faith in her husband's insistence that he could prepare for everything and protect his family from any danger. Once again we see the consequences of inability to accept the loss of control, and Bello comes to represent those in society who remain unaware of the tortures done in their name, but who when it's all said and done look at their children and say, "It was wrong, but it was done to try and protect my child, so I cannot condemn the people who did it. After all, they were probably good people at heart who just did terrible things out of necessity." In this scenario where the characters represent differing societal reactions and status, Each of us can probably point to any one of those characters and admit to identifying with what they did and how they felt, within the context of this story. But transpose those positions onto the debate about torture in the War on Terror and see how many people feel comfortable admitting which of those characters they identified with most. This is not about moral equivalence between a parent whose child is missing and the White House that orders the torture of suspects. This is about the equivalence between our feelings in the personalized context of the story, and the reality of our actions and responsibilities as a society in the real-life context of the use of torture by our government. The film gets us to feel comfortable taking a position and relating to these characters, as a way of making us give voice to truths we'd otherwise prefer not to confront. Before you think, then the film is still presenting a case that most people will interpret as saying our personal hypocrisy should stifle our condemnation of torture by our government. Just watch the film and see where it goes. It does not try for an easy out. There are implications that resonate after the final sequence. I don't want to spoil them here, but I'll say the film manages the hard task of bringing closure to the story on its own merits within the personal context, allowing you the option of watching it as just a straightforward mystery thriller, yet making a significant larger statement about the tension between the rule of law and our sense of necessity to do whatever it takes in certain extreme situations. Prisoners is in the best thriller traditions, but goes deeper into a reflection of one of the greatest moral dilemmas in modern society. In attempting to confront that dilemma in a more direct and personal way, the film is several steps above most other crime thrillers or revenge tales, choosing to not only be memorable, but to matter. The main story of Prisoners is the kidnapping of two young girls. But the movie as a whole is an examination of the kinds of prisons people find themselves in physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Mazes end up being a bigger deal than you'd probably expect. The whole concept of a maze is that people become lost in the convolutions and complications of the structure. Prisoners puts that concept onto how people struggle to work through and escape from their traumas. Whether that's the death of a child, the loss of faith in God, discovering a parent who has committed SIDE, murdering a murderer, having your child abducted, torturing someone you know is guilty but won't confess, or a high-stakes job where lives are on the line. That idea of the maze goes beyond the characters to the structure of the story. Prisoners could have presented information in the way most movies do, stacking details in a chronological, linear fashion that's digestible and allows viewers to go from a place of total ignorance to a place of complete understanding. Instead, it purposefully scatters important details throughout the story, without chronological context, meaning it's easy to forget them or not connect them the way we should connect them. This is done in order to have Prisoners become a narrative maze. The seemingly simple progress of the story is an artistic choice to create the sense of an itch you can't quite scratch, that there's more going on than you may have realized. Denis Villeneuve and company accomplished this by placing key backstory and exposition details throughout the movie without ever having a scene that clearly ties them all together. Meaning it's on the viewer to actively complete the few missing pieces of the puzzle. Thematically, beyond mazes, religion and trees are huge motifs. The main villain is in a war against the Christian God, while the hero is named after a god of Norse mythology. There are characters named Grace and Joy. Many times throughout the film, there's an emphasis on forests and trees. What a coincidence that Joy's last name is Birch, a very common tree in America. There's something being said in this collision between civilization and nature, Christianity, and the old gods. The pretentious stuff gets at the construction of the story. The last shot of the movie is Loki, at night, hearing a faint whistle. We know it's coming from Keller Dover, trapped underground. Unfortunately, Loki doesn't know that. There's tension as Loki hears the whistle but dismisses it, hears it again, but dismisses it again, before hearing it another time. But before we see him decide to investigate or leave, the movie ends. We're left with the question of, does Loki save Keller or not? Maybe the most impressive thing to me about Prisoners is that almost everything that happens in the movie is a clue for Loki. The question is, will he put it all together and solve the puzzle? Which really is a question for us. Have we been paying attention to all the clues that point to whether Loki will or won't find Keller? Prisoners is the first in a long and seriously credible line of fall films for people who have graduated high school. There are no explosions, no fart jokes, no capes or superheroes. Well, no superheroes in the traditional sense. But there is a great deal of tension, of drama, of thrills and tears and grit and moments where you will often forget to breathe. Prisoners is a phenomenal thriller with a group of actors who I could watch stand in an elevator together for 2 hours. Lucky for us, though, they have some meaty roles to embody here, full of conflict and humanity, and a screenplay full of twists and turns that keep the momentum pushing forward. Hugh Jackman plays Keller Dover, a hard-working husband and father to a teenage son and younger daughter, Anna. We open on a subtle but telling scene of Keller and his son hunting deer in the woods on Thanksgiving Day. We find out through conversation that Keller is a man of great faith, dedicated to God and always staying prepared for whatever natural disaster might end civilization. His preparedness is one of the great ironies early in the picture. Keller, his wife Grace, Maria Bello, and their kids walk down to their friend's house for Thanksgiving dinner. Their friends are Franklin and Nancy, played by Terrence Howard and Viola Davis, and they have a young daughter the same age as Anna. That afternoon the girls go outside to play and before long the adults realize they have disappeared. The panic starts slowly, as I imagine it would, with curiosity transforming into a rushed walk, darting eyes, and once all grown-ups find themselves back in the same room without results, the panic reaches a higher level. Until the police are called, and hours turn into days, and desperation and sadness travel into anger and frustration. The range of emotions in such a short period of time must be unbearable, and on the faces of these characters it is displayed with great passion and earnestness. The detective on the scene is Loki, played by Jake Gyllenhaal in what I think is the role of the film. Jackman has the showy role, the easier one because he is given all liberties to flip out, to scream and cry and search wildly in the night for his daughter. But Gyllenhaal's role requires more nuances, and nuance is what he brings. We are never shown anything about Loki's personal life as he searches tirelessly for the missing children. There are small details in his character tattoos, a blinking twitch, the long hair that suggest a past unlike most detectives in these stories. While these parents are slowly going mad, it is Loki's resolve and his calmness that keeps the picture on track. He is the perfect guide for an audience. The creation of Loki for this story is one of the film's deft touches of brilliance, and the performance of Gyllenhaal is paramount. The first lead in the case is a shabby RV, driven by a strange young man named Alex Jones, Paul Dano. He is arrested, questioned, but with the mind of a 10-year-old the police see him as an innocent and let him go. This decision does not sit well with Keller, who accosts Alex outside the police station. Alex says something to him that suggests he knows where the missing girls may be, and this eats away at Keller. His pleas to Loki go unheard by the police captain. Keller makes a desperate decision, he kidnaps Alex and holds him, torturing him to try and get answers. This is one of the many turns Prisoners takes, a morality conundrum which becomes front and center. I am sure some fathers, like Terrence Howard's Franklin, do not agree with the abduction even though they desperately want their daughter back. But I am certain there are more fathers siding with Keller given the circumstances. The abduction of Alex is only the tip of the iceberg regarding the twists and turns and the mystery of what happened to these girls. I won't go into any more details for fear of inadvertently spoiling the story. I will go on about my admiration for this film, a bold and unnerving thriller from top to bottom. Running nearly 2.5 hours, nothing about Prisoners feels long, there are endings stacked upon endings, and none of them are gratuitous or forced. Even the true ending itself is left open. As I said before, Hugh Jackman has the easier role, but that is no slight on his performance. He is magnificent as a man trying to keep himself together and correct what he feels to be a mistake by allowing someone to harm his family. Gyllenhaal is a revelation, and the rest of the cast fills in the gaps with their own powerful turns. While Howard, Davis, and Bello have limited screen time, their desperation is felt through various moments on screen. Credit director Denis Villeneuve for balancing Prisoners perfectly between these large actors delivering large performances, and the very intimate, very human nature of the story. These homes and this neighborhood ring true, and when he decides to embellish in certain scenes, the embellishments pay off by ramping up the tension. This may be a tough film for parents to see. As I will be a parent early next year, I wonder whether I will receive this film this same time in 2014. But either way, Prisoners is a wonderful scream from the hilltops, announcing the fall movie season. If all you know about Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners is based on the trailers, you don't know much about it at all. Don't worry though, that's just the way it should be. Having just played to rave reviews at Telluride, and all but sure to do the same thing at TIFF, you'll be reading and hearing lots and lots about the film between now and its general release on September 20th. And when the public gets to see it opening day, wow, just you wait. This will be the water cooler movie of the fall, and the one everyone's going to have an opinion about. I was lucky in that I got to see it knowing very little about the film other than that which I got from the first preview, which, I must say, was rather ingeniously done, as it gives away virtually nothing that happens outside the first 40 minutes of the lengthy 2.5-hour running time. Rest assured, I'm not going to be the jerk that spoils the movie, so if this review comes off a little vague, it's only to avoid ruining any of the film's surprises, which kept me on the edge of my seat through the entire running time. In fact, as soon as I walked out of Prisoners, I emailed my editor here to tell him Prisoners makes SE7N look like Blazing Saddles. I don't mean that Prisoners is as violent as Fincher's masterpiece, but it's similarly disturbing, perhaps even more so in that it's a film about adults hurting children, which is without a doubt the most heinous crime imaginable. In fact, Prisoners isn't terribly gruesome, but on an emotional level it's nothing short of devastating. When it was over, I felt like going somewhere to cry for half an hour, as that's how drained I was by its power. It exposes us to an evil that's terrifying simply due to the fact that it's so real. With Prisoners, Denis Villeneuve certainly establishes himself as one of our major filmmakers, and he'll no doubt be rocketing to the top of the A-list, regardless of whether or not this makes a dime, although many people are predicting this is going to be an Oscar contender, which it most certainly deserves to be. If you've seen Incendies, Villeneuve's Oscar-nominated Québécois movie from a few years ago, you'll know this guy is already a master, and truly, Prisoners is the work of a genius. It should be said, he's helped immeasurably by the brilliant script by Aaron Guzikowski, which for once is a blacklist winner that lives up to the hype. The cinematography by the great Roger Deakins also gives this a striking look, with it initially boasting a reserved color palette, only to get more and more explosive as the film goes on. However, as good a job as Villeneuve did, I wasn't surprised that he delivered a hell of a film. I expect that from him. What really threw me for a loop were the performances. Everyone loves Hugh Jackman. He's personable, handsome, can sing, dance, act, do action, etc. But, Jackman has never had a role that's pushed him to the brink like this one has. His Keller Dover is a fascinating character. On the surface, he seems like some kind of Bible-thumping cliché, with the first scene showing him teaching his son to hunt, before showing us his survival gear-filled cellar, and listening to him pray. But, Jackman doesn't play Dover like a fanatic. Yes, he's religious, and probably more than a little paranoid. But, he's also a doting dad, a loving husband, and a great friend to the sophisticated family next door, headed by Terrence Howard and Viola Davis, both of whom are at their best, who like him enough to invite him and his family to spend Thanksgiving with them. Once the girls are kidnapped, Jackman's character eventually gets so primal and boiling with rage that he makes Wolverine look milquetoast by comparison. There's a scene where Jackman offhandedly smashes a sink to bits with a hammer, just by bringing it down a little too hard that will make you gasp. Jackman's like a caged animal, and his fury, while justified, is terrifying in its intensity. As the second lead, Jake Gyllenhaal makes an interesting contrast. A young cop with a chip on his shoulder, Gyllenhaal is everything Jackman's not in this, from the tattoos on his neck and fingers, to his often cool, but compassionate demeanor. Between this and End of Watch, Gyllenhaal's starting to excel at playing cops, and while he initially takes a backseat to Jackman, who's clearly relishing the role of his life, he ends up giving a performance that's just as gripping as Jackman's. The same goes for Paul Dano, as the mentally challenged prime suspect, and Melissa Leo as his guardian. Both subvert the audience's expectations at every turn, as neither plays the kind of stock character you'd expect from a film like this. Dano often has a tendency to go big in his performances, but here he plays his character strikingly quiet, making him difficult to read, and even sympathetic. Leo's performance was even more difficult to grasp, with her motivations never being clear until they absolutely have to be. I really can't praise Prisoners highly enough, as to me it feels like some kind of masterpiece. It's without a doubt the best movie I've seen this year, and I'd be gobsmacked if anything else plays at TIFF, or heck, even comes out this year, that measures up to it. To me, the ultimate key to a movie's success is how much of an effect it had on me emotionally. This one left me a wreck, and will likely do the same to even the most jaded viewer. It's rare for a movie that runs for over 2 hours to stay thrilling for its entirety. It's rarer still for a film to make you feel something for its characters, especially when you aren't completely aware of if they're good or bad during such a sustained amount of tension. And it's almost unheard of for you to keep thinking about a film for hours or days after it ends. Such is the case with Prisoners, a fantastic film and one of the year's best. The film begins innocently enough. One family, the Dovers, is going over to the Birches' house for Thanksgiving dinner. The two families are close, we find out, and this is how they choose to celebrate the holiday. Each family consists of a mother, father, teenager, and daughter under the age of 6. After dinner, each group separates, adults spend time chatting with other adults, the teenagers head to the basement to watch television, and the daughters head back to the Birch residence in hopes of finding one of their whistles. Fast forward to later on, and the daughters are nowhere to be found. Now what? They search. They look everywhere. No dice. There was an RV earlier, which was driven by the mentally deficient Alex, Paul Dano. He becomes the prime suspect. A detective, Loki, Jake Gyllenhaal, starts up an investigation. The families are devastated. The rest of Prisoners takes place primarily over the next week. They say after a week, the chance of finding a child alive is halved. After a month, it's almost non-existent. Time is certainly of monumental importance. You know all this from the trailer. Prisoners had a trailer released months before its theatrical release, as should happen, and it appeared to give away the majority of the plot. I hated the trailer for Prisoners. A movie like this one needs mysteries hidden. Fret not, dear reader, as the trailer stops about 1/3 of the way into the film, and reveals nothing too significant. Of greater importance is that it doesn't rob the film of a few dramatic and tension-filled scenes, even though they're shown in part during the trailer. Prisoners is a film that keeps you on your toes. It isn't in the least bit predictable, and even once you think it has played all of its cards, it pulls out another 5. Even as the film rolls its credits, you won't be entirely sure of everything you saw. You'll want to watch it again right away to make sure you caught everything, and to make sure it didn't cheat. Guess what? I'd put money on it being too smart to resort to cheating. You can figure it out earlier than it reveals itself, but you likely won't be able to. This is how you make a thriller. A small example comes in the form of the detective, Loki. We've seen Jake Gyllenhaal at the investigating end of a crime before in Zodiac, also a lengthy thriller, but he's improved so much as an actor since then. Even though the film never tries to implicate him, simply by the name of the character and a small tick which Gyllenhaal adds to the role, we can never be sure that Loki wasn't the mastermind behind the kidnapping. Small but superbly effective techniques. It also has the rare trait to make you care about everyone involved, regardless of what they've done over the course of the film and whether or not the film is trying to make us lean one way or another in regard to their innocence. Take Keller Dover, Hugh Jackman, the father of one of the children, who winds up torturing a kid for an extremely large portion of the film, but because we understand his motivation and his intentions, he becomes one of the more sympathetic characters. Prisoners has the ability to haunt. Because of its questionable morals, you'll be thinking about its characters for days after it ends. Would you make similar decisions if faced with their situation? You'll also be attempting to put each piece of the puzzle into place, and thinking back to early moments in the film which might or might not be clues. Seemingly inconsequential things in sharp, smart thrillers like this one are rarely as pointless as you initially think, and you slap yourself once the film tells you that they mattered. You could have figured that out. The cast assembled for this production is outstanding. While it's Jackman and Gyllenhaal who get more central roles, and Jackman gives the most intense performance of his career while Gyllenhaal plays his Zodiac character with even more confidence and depth. Viola Davis and Terrence Howard show up as the neighbors, Maria Bello plays the wife of Jackman's character, and Melissa Leo plays the aunt of Paul Dano's suspect character. These are all great actors and they turn in great work. Prisoners is a fantastic film. It runs for just over 150 minutes but doesn't drag for even a single moment. It has a complex plot which will keep you guessing for the vast majority of its running time, and it doesn't cheat in that attempt to bewilder. It contains fantastic performances, great scenes which will rile you up emotionally, and the ability to make you think about it for days after it ends. It is one of the best films of the year. Darkness. Since the film is directed by Denis Villeneuve, with a script by Aaron Gruzikowski, Prisoners has a dark and gloomy feel that's reminiscent of David Fincher or William Friedkin. Roger Deakins' cinematography creates a tense environment, equally helped by Johan Johansson's eerie, atmospheric score. Oscars all around. With a cast that includes Hugh Jackman, Jake Gyllenhaal, Paul Dano, Melissa Leo, Terrence Howard, Viola Davis, and Maria Bello, no weak link can be found. Some actors, like Viola Davis, have small roles, but still very crucial to the story. Hugh Jackman does his best work here, surpassing his Oscar-nominated role in Les Miserables, 2012. It's an intense, committed performance. Not once will the audience be reminded of Wolverine. Symbolism. The themes of vigilante justice, how far is too far, and even religious elements are all at play. None will be spoiled here, as it is best to know as little as possible. This movie is chock full of surprises, and thankfully, none of them feel contrived or like a cheat. Hugh Jackman seems to be getting more intense with every passing role, from the haunted but determined Jean Valjean in Les Miserables to the internalist gruffness and pain of Logan in The Wolverine. He brings a mix of all these attributes to the character of Keller in Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners, which surprisingly for a film that lasts 153 minutes, holds you captive for the entire runtime. Keller is a man who lives by God and the gun. His basement is stacked with equipment to deal with most end-of-the-world scenarios, his truck radio permanently tuned to religion, and though he clearly loves his wife, Mario Bello, and family as much as they love him, his emotional settings are wound just a bit too tight. Jackman pitches his performance perfectly, never once suggesting he would pose a danger to his friends and family but still intimating thinly covered troubles. He tells his son that the most important thing is to be ready, but he certainly isn't prepared for what happens next. A happy Thanksgiving meal with friends Franklin and Nancy, Terrence Howard and Viola Davis, descends into despair after the youngest daughters of both families disappear. A Camp Irvine driving weirdo, Alex, Paul Dano, impressive and expressive in a role that is virtually mute, is scooped up for the crime, but local detective Loki, Jake Gyllenhaal, can find nothing to hold him for. After Keller becomes convinced Alex holds the key to the kidnapping, he decides waiting for the police to solve the situation is not an option. Aaron Gruzikowski's previous film, Contraband, was a messy and casually violent adaptation, but he fares much better with his own story. The script is intelligent and, considering the lengths to which Keller may be prepared to go, remarkably restrained in its depictions of violence. The inner rage and unpredictability of Keller in the face of his impotence at the situation make his scenes with Denis edge tense. The mental state of the characters remains the focal point and, as Keller becomes increasingly desperate, those around him, and us, too, are forced to question our own judgment, as we start to get lost in his moral maze. Guzikowski also adeptly balances Keller's story with Loki's stoic but methodical approach to the crime. Gyllenhaal, so good in Villeneuve's other new film Enemy, is a match for Jackman, as the cop who rarely lets emotion get the better of him. Atmospheric cinematography by Roger Deakins lends an affecting air of doomy portent to this twisty thriller about child abduction and the corruption of innocence. Hugh Jackman and Terrence Howard are the fathers of two missing girls who take the law into their own hands after Paul Dano's prime suspect is released without charge. Contraband writer Aaron Guzikowski's script toys with Nietzschean ideas about the inherent dangers of fighting monsters. At every turn, violence begets violence, with the sleep of reason producing nothing but nightmares. As the detective charged with cracking the case, Jake Gyllenhaal plays obsessive with his eyelids, blinking like someone permanently awakening from a stunned stupor. Viola Davis and Maria Bello are convincingly wretched as the mothers who react to heartbreak in very different ways, while Melissa Leo lends gravity even as the narrative floats towards the lightweight. There are holes in the plot big enough to drive an RV through, and the labyrinthine final act stretches credibility beyond breaking point. But it's a tense and engaging thriller with some big ideas, only some of which it is able to carry. I really enjoyed this film about kidnapping, and encouraged my parents to watch it about a week ago. I moseyed in about 2/3 the way through the film, when Hugh Jackman's wielding a claw hammer and quivering with fury. "What the hell are we watching?" my dad asked from the edge of his seat. Love that sink scene. Think about how the theme of imprisonment relates to each character. How informed each party is, and in turn, the motivations that result. Just from that little suggestion, you can tell you're in for a quality picture. For those who haven't seen Prisoners, if you like great movies, see this film. Here's what great means. It means great enough. If you leave Prisoners feeling genuine hatred, you're being overly critical. So check it out, but be careful of the spoilers below. Hugh Jackman may be the best actor currently working in Hollywood. I'm biased because he's been my #1 favorite since X-Men 2000, but my dude's quickly climbing the charts. He's so prolific nowadays. I've seen most his catalog, except for Australia, and I stand by Swordfish and Van Helsing as great movies. I'll argue to the death for either. I have no idea why their Rotten Tomatoes percentages are in the 20s. Baffles me, truly. Back to the Prisoners review. Anyway, my point is, Hugh Jackman delivers a spectacular performance as Keller Dover in this film. Keller's a wildly compelling character with complex motivations. Further acting prowess is displayed by his character's wife, Gracie Dover, played by Maria Bello, who steers a powerful teary-eyed scene. Viola Davis plays Nancy Birch, and also carries a tense scene without muttering a word of dialogue. She just delivers a long, dead stare. Terrence Howard's not my favorite, but he does a decent enough job here. I suppose I avoid giving him too much credit because I've heard some not so nice things about him. He's the second actor credited for Iron Man, after RDJ himself. And he was replaced by another black actor, Don Cheadle, after demanding too much money for the second installment in the series. I didn't even notice until well after 3. Jake Gyllenhaal as Detective Loki has a wildly compelling discussion with a priest, and ties together the film in a pleasing way. Jake's rather talented, I feel like I don't see enough of him. Detective Loki's shirt is always buttoned to his chin, but he's never wearing a tie, which irritated me until someone pointed out the tattoo on his neck. The only plot hole is the scene in which Gyllenhaal opens the trunks full of snakes. His character isn't the type to leave the lids ajar, allowing the serpents escape. Before moving on with reviewing Prisoners, I must mention that David Dastmalchian delivers as a more capable deranged man than the role he plays in The Dark Knight. He's a solid actor, and I bet we'll see more from him in the future. Lot of powerful gazing goes on in this film. From Viola D's deadpan, to the stare down between Jake and Paul Dano, you get some strong gawks. When Dano signs his release from prison, it gives me the chills. Prisoners is about a man, Hugh Jackman, who tries to hunt down his 6-year-old daughter and her friend who have been abducted after Thanksgiving dinner. He does this after the police arrest a suspect but release him for lack of evidence. As he gets closer to the suspected abductor, he finds a man obsessed with making mazes. I do not support this premise as someone who has a website committed to making mazes. Can he find the children in time to keep them safe? He takes matters into his own hands to find the children, but will he take things too far? A really tense thriller I highly recommend. Great intensity with a wonderful script and cinematography. It is dark and there are twists and turns. The film is full of stars beyond Hugh Jackman, with Jake Gyllenhaal, Viola Davis, Terrence Howard, Maria Bello, and Paul Dano also part of the cast. The director, Denis Villeneuve, is so talented that I need to keep updating his list of great films on this blog post: Blade Runner 2049, Arrival, Incendies, Sicario, Dune Parts 1 and 2, and this might be his best film. A cold, dank landscape mirrors an even colder script as hopelessness banks the curbs of this one-way highway of a film. I had to pull over and get off. If my metaphor is lost on you, then you feel a bit like I did 20 minutes into this film when long pan shots lingered over sticks from the woods and panels on an old RV. These are not clues. They are B-roll. Combining some incredible performances from Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal with some phenomenal cinematography by the legendary Roger Deakins alongside an effective original score by the late Johan Johansson. Prisoners is truly a masterclass in both filmmaking and storytelling. Although some audience members may be turned off by the film's depressing subject matter and few graphic scenes, this story of two families' lives being turned upside down is nevertheless an enthralling thriller/drama throughout. Plot summary: shortly after their Thanksgiving dinner, parents, Keller and Grace Dover, discover their 6-year-old daughter and her best friend are missing. So after contacting the authorities, the driven, Detective Loki is assigned to lead the case. But as hours turn into days, knowing his daughter's life is at stake, frantic father, Keller considers taking matters into his own hands. Directed by Denis Villeneuve, Sicario, Arrival, Blade Runner, 2049, Villeneuve further proves here that he is one of the best filmmakers currently working. As every one of his films are always engaging and visually breathtaking, with Prisoners being no exception. As throughout the entirety of its lengthy runtime, Prisoners manages to be a compelling, tense and emotional experience that will leave most viewers on the edge of their seats, making the viewer long for the truth just as much as the film's characters do, with the film's main theme of parenthood even exploring the idea of how far a parent would truly go to protect their child, most notably through Keller's questionable actions later within the story. The film's main pairing of Hugh Jackman as Keller Dover and Jake Gyllenhaal as Detective Loki is the perfect combination of two talented actors, as both give brilliant performances as their respective characters, with Hugh Jackman in particular, giving one of the best performances of his entire career. Especially in the scene, the interrogation, in which Keller repeatedly tortures the potential kidnapper of his daughter, resulting in the scene soon becoming one of the film's best moments, mostly through Jackman's incredibly intense performance. In addition to the two leads, the supporting cast of Terrence Howard, Viola Davis, Maria Bello, Dylan Minnette, Paul Dano, and Melissa Leo are all excellent, with each member of the main cast adding to the film's realistic portrayal of two concerned families, going days without rest as their thoughts dwell purely on their missing children. From the opening shot through to the very last, the cinematography by Roger Deakins is nothing short of phenomenal. As Prisoners elevates its already gripping narrative through its many stunning shots, alongside the film's absolutely superb lighting, which makes fantastic use of darkness and silhouettes wherever possible, a staple of Roger Deakins' cinematography, which only backs up the film's grim tone and tense atmosphere further. Another element of the film that also adds to its visual aesthetic is its use of weather. Being set in a small town in Pennsylvania, Prisoners makes great use of the state's dreary weather for a number of scenes, meaning many shots are enhanced due to the constant barrage of rain and snow within them. The late Johan Johansson handles the original score for the film, most known for his work on The Theory of Everything along with plenty of other films from director Denis Villeneuve. The film's score really adds to many of its dramatic moments, as the soundtrack mostly focuses on the story's more emotional and tragic aspects, and while not overly memorable, the tracks, I Can't Find Them and Through Falling Snow both fit the bleak tone of the film flawlessly. While the track, The Keeper is also worth a quick mention simply due to its impactful feel. Although it isn't a major problem, my only real issue with the film is the lack of depth for some of its characters, as Detective Loki and Alex Jones both have many interesting traits, with Detective Loki having a variety of tattoos, rings, and facial tics, many of which were actually Jake Gyllenhaal's ideas. Whilst Alex has the IQ of a 10-year-old due to his learning difficulties. Yet even with these unique traits, I never felt like either of these two characters were explored enough, even with the film's many attempts at subtle characterization through visual storytelling. In short, Prisoners is not only one of my favorite films from 2013, but one of all my all-time favorite thrillers in general. Through its spectacular cinematography, tense atmosphere, and compelling plot among many, many other elements, Prisoners is honestly unmissable. Being just another piece of the beyond excellent filmography of director Denis Villeneuve, this thriller is certainly one I'd recommend to anyone in need of a memorizing mystery. If you've never seen a film by Villeneuve, I'd say Prisoners is a tremendous place to begin, despite the film not quite beating out my personal favorite film of his, that being Blade Runner, 2049. Final rating: Prisoners is a film that on the surface should be a knockout. The cast is anchored by Hugh Jackman, The Wolverine, Les Miserables, Real Steel, and Jake Gyllenhaal, Donnie Darko, End of Watch, Brokeback Mountain, and features the support of Terrence Howard, Dead Man Down, Hustle and Flow, Iron Man, Viola Davis, The Help, Maria Bello, History of Violence, E.R., Paul Dano, There Will Be Blood, Looper, and Melissa Leo, Oblivion, The Fighter. The premise featured in the trailer is a guaranteed nail-biter: two little girls, who are friends, are kidnapped from their front yard during a Thanksgiving dinner without leaving any clues behind. The parents are frantic. When the cops can't find any actionable leads, despite having a suspect in custody, the fathers of the two children begin to enact justice in ways that the police cannot. The movie sets itself up as a mystery, leaving you clues along the way of who might be responsible for the kidnapping of these two innocent children. The real mystery, however, is how a film like this, which is clearly a vehicle built to be a massive hit, falls so short of its promise and leaves the audience with such a mundane experience. You must be warned up front that this film clocks in at roughly 153 minutes. And as you watch, you feel every second. There are moments where Prisoners is compelling and gripping, and then there are long stretches of time where we are meant to feel what the parents are feeling, not knowing if they'll ever see their little girls again. While this is a great plot device that is meant to attach the audience to the emotions being felt on screen, Prisoners very rarely grabs you and draws you into the emotion of the characters on screen. It instead has you checking your watch. This is part of the mystery of the failings of this film, because Hugh Jackman does a great job in this role as a contractor trying to hold it together while desiring justice be served and his little girl to be found. But despite his efforts, so much of the support system of his family and friends seems detached from him, despite the sound performances of the cast. Maria Bello, who plays his wife, is largely missing throughout the film, and you never sense that they are part of the same family trying to deal with the same event. Each copes in their own way, but rarely does the film try to connect us to the family as a whole. His son gets one bonding scene with his father and one with his sister before disappearing for 3/4 ths of the film. Terrence Howard's role could have been developed a lot more. Meant to be a contrasting personality and more of a morally grounded individual compared to Jackman, Howard is given very little to do except stand around, in each scene, watching Jackman will himself to break all kinds of moral boundaries in order to help their daughters make it home alive. Jake Gyllenhaal, likewise, plays a quiet police officer who is said to have solved every case he has been on. We are given no other real background despite a mention of troubled past in a church-based boys' home. He is simply slow, steady, methodical, and subdued in his approach to the case. Yet despite his subdued portrayal, his presence fills the screen, as do hints that he has a much more colorful past than his squeaky clean cop persona would suggest. Tattoos adorn his neck and hands, in contrast with his clean-cut mannerisms and dress. His steady, somber, yet relentless nature is a great compliment to the anxious, angry, slightly odd survivalist of Jackman's character. Other films in this vein, I believe, despite being a bit more manipulative in getting the audience pumped up to destroy the bad guys, have done a better job than Prisoners at grabbing the audience, pulling them into the emotions of the family going through the ideal, and allowing them the release they need to pursue justice as they watch it unfold. Ron Howard's Ransom is a prime example of what Prisoners sets out to be, even if Prisoners would prefer to be more raw in its portrayal than the Hollywood gloss and polish of the Mel Gibson starring film. But where Ransom, and even the more recent Taken, played all the right notes for the audience's enjoyment, Prisoners seems content to sit back and just let it slowly unfold layer by layer, even if it loses the audience it is trying to win. Too much time is spent with Jackman capturing and torturing the person he believes is responsible for the crime against his little girl than him simply getting some facts that allows him to push forward. In fact, the entire middle part of the movie seems stuck in the same gear and bogs down any goodwill it built up with the premise, cast, and tense first act. By the time the third act kicks into gear, we finally get a taste of what the movie is aiming for. Clues begin to become more clear, and lead to more questions that take the script forward. But as it does so, Jackman and Gyllenhaal and the antagonist is all there really is. We lose touch of Terrence Howard, Viola Davis, Maria Bello, and their families for the most part. While this enables the film to focus the storyline in order to jump into a higher gear in terms of action, their part of the story being overlooked causes the ending of the film to largely lose the family-based validation and reconciliation that it was seeking at the beginning of the film. In the end, the straightforward kidnapping, vigilante justice film narrative that it seeks to pursue is distracted by a weightier religious subplot that is not fully dealt with. Religious iconography fills the screen from statues, crosses, and platitudes. We also see characters steeped in a version of faith or the lack thereof. Each character in the film seems to be a subtle caricature of the religious extremists we read about. All are Christian-based caricatures in this film. Their form of faith is to listen to odd gospel music, plan for surviving the end of days, or have religious motivations for some of the most odd behaviors they exhibit. Ultimately, we are presented with the notion of a war going on against God. Apparently this whole film is a visual depiction of this war as it plays out in all of our lives. Everyone is a cause, and everyone is a victim of this battle. This exploration of brokenness and its effect on our actions and their ramifications is a bold idea and worthy of explorations, but here it serves as a distraction to the larger narrative the audience is there to see played out on the screen. In the end, Prisoners simply ends without fully resolving the conflict it set up in the beginning. This only solidifies the problem many will have with the film as a whole. Namely, how can a film with such a strong story, cast, and narrative find itself falling so short of its own goals and only producing a lackluster experience despite a gut-ripping subject matter? The answer is that maybe this film is simply a prisoner of its own ambition. The problem is that while watching this movie, we feel like the ones who are trapped. This film, directed by Denis Villeneuve, written by Aaron Guzikowski, produced by Broderick Johnson, Adam Kalbrenner, starring Hugh Jackman, cinematography Roger A. Deakins, edited by Joel Cox, music by Johan Johansson, production companies Alcon Entertainment. Distributed by Warner Brothers Pictures. Release dates August 30, 2013. Running time 153 minutes. Country United States. Language English. Budget $46 million. Box office $122.1 million.